Chapter 1534. In just an instant, everyone in the devouring star broke out in a cold sweat. Their bodies were ice-cold and their skulls were trembling. An extremely ominous premonition formed in everyone's hearts. Through the evil eye, the grave god projected the image she was seeing into the boundless darkness of the Star Eater, which was the inner world where Peng Shiren and Wang Ling were. Even though the outcome of the battle had yet to be decided. However, it was as if the grave goddess could already foresee the ending. Shiren is going to lose. I knew this was a trap. This person is not easy to deal with. Sure enough, his weak aura was all an act, the grave goddess said with a trembling voice. Without further explanation, the hearts of Chihiro, the silver-skinned human king, Jiugong Xinghui, and the other silver-skinned aliens sank at the same time. Senior, what should we do? Chiechioku asked anxiously. The situation seemed a little awkward. This was because none of them dared to go out. Even if they did, they wouldn't be able to join the battle below. Even if they joined the battle, they would only be cannon fodder. Even the simplest method of delaying the battle didn't exist. It was the kind that would send them straight to their deaths. However, under such circumstances, they knew that Peng Shiren's importance to them was self-evident. They couldn't let anything happen to Peng Shiren at this critical moment. The heavenly tomb had yet to open. Currently, only Peng Shiren knew the location of the heavenly tomb. The grave god was still waiting for the opening of the heavenly tomb to fuse with the other half of his soul that had been separated from him for many years. If Peng Shiren died at Wang Ling's hands at this time, everything would be over. His evil eyes stared at the inner world. His gaze pierced through the layers of space as he stared at the confrontation between Wang Ling and Peng Shiren from a god's perspective. Wang Ling's ears twitched as if he had sensed something. A pair of red eyes stared back. The grave goddess was so frightened that she quickly retracted her gaze. This youth was too terrifying, it was unimaginably sharp. There's no other way. In this situation, I can only do my best to save them. The grave goddess suppressed the panic on her face and said with a frown. Senior, what do you want to do? Akano Kumo's face twitched, and his whole body couldn't stop trembling. Every time he thought about the moment when his head was pinched by that young man's clone, he would shiver in fear. In this situation, I can't leave the mountain directly. You guys can't be counted on. Therefore, I can only think of one way. The grave god said. With Chihu and Silverskin Human King's realm, going there would be no different from courting death. The grave goddess knew this very well. However, although the two of them were weak, they would be of great use in the future. Now was not the time to sacrifice them. The grave god had lived for so long in the history of cultivation and was even regarded as a devil by Tao ancestor Wang back then. It was impossible for the grave god to not have his own trump cards. In the past, the grave god had even planned several wars against the entire universe. He attempted to conquer 10 universes in order to build his ultimate cultivation universe empire. However, such plans were repeatedly discovered and crushed by Tao ancestor Wang. The legions that were prepared in the past were also destroyed by Tao ancestor Wang one by one. However, after the grave god's soul was separated and sealed, Tao ancestor Wang believed that he was no longer a threat and did not pursue the matter further. And it was precisely because of this that the grave goddess had a chance to make a comeback. At this moment, the grave goddess closed her eyes and communicated with the things she had prepared for her conquest of the universe. Hydrogen slave, helium slave, lithium slave, beryllium slave. In his heart, she called out these familiar names one by one. Not long after, on the battlefield in the distance, several blurry figures surrounded by primordial chi were suddenly teleported from the distant universe to the inner world where Wang Ling and Peng Shiren were. They didn't have faces, and their bodies had a kind of obsidian luster. They were puppets refined from special materials. The grave god called them slaves. But in fact, they had been the most important part of the grave god's plan to conquer the universe back then. They were also known as ancient godly weapons. Unfortunately, she didn't have many of them left. Of the hundreds of millions of ancient godly weapons back then, there were now only a few hundred left. The ones she had summoned were the ones closest to Earth. But the grave god felt that they should be enough to buy some time to rescue Peng Shiren. The 4 ancient godly weapons that were closest to Earth arrived like meteorites. In an instant, there was a huge earthquake in the inner world, and all the buildings on Sun Island were destroyed in the blink of an eye. A tsunami that was dozens of meters high swept over, creating a scene that looked like the end of the world. The pitch-black humanoid ancient godly weapons were 3 meters tall. Standing in front of the human cultivators, they looked like giants. The diamond-shaped floating heads had a high-tech feel to them. It was hard to imagine that they had actually been created tens of thousands of years ago. Peng Shiren's and Wang Ling's pupils contracted at the same time. They never thought that 4 ancient godly weapons would actually descend here. This was also the first time Wang Ling had seen such strange, puppet-like life forms. When the 4 ancient godly weapons landed, they created huge waves. Peng Shiren thought that he had found a chance to escape from this inner world. However, Wang Ling grabbed him by the collar and picked him up like a little chick. Wang Ling directly pulled out Peng Shiren's soul and held it in his palm. Then, he put Songsha Galaxy's soul back into his original body and sent it out of the inner world. This series of actions was very smooth and natural, as if he was replacing a SIM card or a cell phone battery. At that moment, Peng Shiren's soul was in Wang Ling's hand. For some reason, he felt like all the strength in his body had left him. He didn't know what Wang Ling had done. He just felt that his strength was draining away bit by bit. At that moment, the 4 ancient godly weapons which the grave god had sent over were his only hope. Like comets crashing into the earth, they destroyed everything on the ground. Wang Ling was glad that this was the inner world, otherwise who knew how many innocent people would have died because of this undeserved disaster. Boom! The next moment, a great battle broke out. The 4 ancient godly weapons charged at Wang Ling in a battle formation. As they attacked, they exploded with golden light, and their obsidian-like metal bodies gave off a dazzling golden luster. Like cannonballs, they gave off a spirit light that soared into the sky. The spirit energy was like an ocean that flooded over like a great river. Wang Ling was slightly astonished. These ancient godly weapons were actually more powerful than that old god in the divine realm. There were actually Tao gods among them. Wang Ling knew. These things were just puppets. So what realm had the master of these puppets been at back then? The atmosphere suddenly became tense. He stared at Peng Shiren and tried to get some information out of him. In the end, Peng Shiren twisted his neck and just snorted at Wang Ling, "Forget it." Wang Ling gave up on asking, and directly put Peng Shiren's soul into the king's eye. Now, his task was to get rid of these 4 ancient godly weapons as soon as possible. Because Wang Ling could vaguely sense that because of the sudden arrival of the ancient godly weapons, the inner world was already on the verge of collapse. Boom! The 4 ancient godly weapons attacked from 4 directions, and fists the size of small mountains smashed into various parts of Wang Ling's body with the sound of shattering glass. How terrifying! The grave god observed the battle through the eyes of one of the ancient godly weapons. The combined attack of the 4 ancient godly weapons just now was extremely accurate and aimed at vital parts. But Wang Ling wasn't hurt at all. Instead, it was their bodies that suffered from the backlash and broke apart. Is he even human? He's only 16 years old. Chiechiohu's face was unsightly. He had thought that Wang Ling was an old monster who had lived through the ages, but after waking up, he learned from the grave god that Wang Ling was indeed only 16 years old. He didn't feel good at all. How could a 16-year-old be so invincible, to this extent? He wasn't the reincarnation of Tao ancestor Wang. None of this seemed to make sense. Senior, you can't let this person off. Chiechiohu's thoughts were in a mess. He felt that Wang Ling had already become his nightmare. Unless Wang Ling died, he wouldn't be able to live in peace for the rest of his life. I know this better than you. The grave god's evil eyes were profound. He was planning to use the ancient godly weapons to wear down Wang Ling. These 4 ancient godly weapons were just the vanguard, more would arrive one after another in the distance. After the 4 ancient godly weapons suffered a backlash from Wang Ling's body, their bodies shattered. The cracks rapidly healed at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. The backlash didn't work? Wang Ling raised his eyebrows when he saw this. Sure enough, these strange life puppets weren't as simple as he had imagined. But Wang Ling didn't intend to do it himself. Considering that he still had to participate in the high school competition later on, if he did anything to these ancient godly weapons here, he would quickly use up all the one-off talismans he had on him. So, Wang Ling sat on the ground with his back against the wall of the ruins. With one hand on his knee, he assumed a posture of watching a show. Sword, come. He called out softly, and a brown wooden sword abruptly appeared in the inner world. Sword Master, what do you want me to do? Jinka didn't take human form, but appeared in the shape of a sword in front of Wang Ling. Clear the field. Wang Ling lightly stroked the blade of the sword as he gave the order. These two simple words instantly put immense pressure on the grave god, who was secretly observing from a distance. This wasn't his first time seeing Jinka, and he felt that this peachwood sword was a little familiar, but he couldn't figure out where this Jinka had come from. After receiving Wang Ling's order, Jinka's whole body suddenly burst with brown spirit light. Do you also want to dance? The four ancient godly weapons had been floating in the air. A monstrous brown spirit light was accompanied by the most powerful sword chi. It was an overwhelming force that knocked them all down from the sky. The sword pressure was earth-shattering, forming a kind of gravity that made it impossible for these ancient godly weapons to look down on them. Wang Ling was moved by Jinka's lack of caution at this critical moment. There were several times when this little guy deliberately pretended to be weak and wanted to merge with Bai Qiao. Wang Ling just pretended to turn a blind eye to these things. Fortunately, judging from Jinka's performance today, he clearly didn't intend to go easy on them. Thus, the moment Jinka received Wang Ling's order, he immediately put the four ancient godly weapons in their place. But this wasn't the end. The power of the King of Sword Spirits was unfathomable. Clang! Hundreds of thousands of li long, the enormous brown sword chi turned into four beams of light that shot into the sky like laser cannons. Because there were no outsiders in the inner world, Jinka had a lot of room to act freely. The seemingly indiscriminate attack of sword chi. In fact, it was a charge aimed at the vitals. The brown sword light attacked the heads of the four ancient godly weapons, hitting them squarely in the face. With their heads injured, the ancient godly weapons seemed to lose the ability to move, and collapsed to the ground on the spot. But the attack had only just begun. Jinka, with his rich combat experience, didn't hold back at all. The moment the four ancient divine weapons fell, an ocean-like brown sword chi covered the sky and earth, slicing the four ancient divine weapons apart. So decisive. The grave god's eyebrows furrowed tightly. This peachwood sword was too terrifying and decisive. Even though it had already hit the heads, it still cut the four ancient godly weapons up at its own pace. In the blink of an eye, his four ancient godly weapons had already been cut into countless tiny pieces like grains of sand, which were swept into the air by the wildly dancing sword wave. Can they be restored? Chiechiohu's eyes widened in shock. He had never seen such a meticulous dismemberment. They could actually be cut to the size of grains of sand. It was simply as easy as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The grave god was also astonished by this scene, but in the end, he just sneered. It's not over yet. In the next moment, the ancient godly weapons that had been cut to the size of grains of sand burst forth with dazzling golden light again, and spirit power soared into the sky and swept across the ground. Although there weren't many of these ancient godly weapons left, each one had been painstakingly made by the grave god, and all physical attacks were ineffective against them. They also contained sword chi. Not to mention being cut to the size of grains of sand. Even if they were reduced to invisible iron sheets, as long as they had a cellular structure, they could be restored. This was the horror of ancient godly weapons. Their power came from chaos. And chaos meant infinity. Looking at the reformed ancient godly weapons, Jinka frowned deeply. This was his first time dealing with such monsters, and he had no experience at all. But he wasn't afraid at all. These were life forms that had been formed by extracting a special substance from chaos. In theory, they were products of chaos. Sword spirits were also born from chaos. Nowadays, who didn't have something to do with chaos? Since they were all born from chaos, there was nothing to be afraid of. He had been with Wang Ling for many years and had learned so much. Naturally, the things that he knew weren't limited to battle techniques. Since sword chi didn't work, Jinka knew that he had other ideas. Buzz. In the next moment, his peachwood sword hummed lightly and burst forth with even more dazzling light. 2 runes appeared on the body of the peachwood sword. Sword talismans? The grave god laughed. Do you think talismans will work if sword chi doesn't work? Although ancient godly weapons weren't completely immune to talismans, they were still 90% immune. In this world, there weren't many talismans that could be used to suppress ancient godly weapons. But in the next moment, the 2 sword talismans that had appeared on Jinka's body rushed into the air and spread out into an inescapable net that enveloped all 4 ancient godly weapons. In an instant, the auras of the 4 ancient godly weapons weakened. They were entangled in the net and couldn't move. What? The grave god was speechless with shock. When he saw the words on the sword talismans, the shock in his heart was even more indescribable. It wasn't very difficult to understand. It said, odd changes, even changes, the symbol depends on the quadrant. Chapter 1535. You can't escape. Jinka was wearing a brown tang suit, and the white robe over it fluttered in the wind. He had raised his sword talisman suppression to the highest level, and instantly created an inescapable net that contained the 4 ancient divine weapons with overwhelming pressure. From the looks of it, it seemed that everything was over. Sitting against the wall of the ruins, Wang Ling was exceptionally calm. Because everything was a predictable scene. These ancient divine weapons had a mechanism to constantly resurrect, and while they looked difficult to deal with, Wang Ling was well aware that they were no match for Jinka. It would be a piece of cake for Jinka to suppress them. However, the grave god's ultimate goal was to rescue Pingshiren. It would be hard for him to send just these 4 ancient divine weapons to support the overall situation. Even if more ancient divine weapons arrived later on, it would be useless. Wang Ling had never had a head-on confrontation with the grave god, and had only sent him a bomb made from the new Heavenly Tao magic cube as a gift. He had almost blown the grave god up. He needed to highlight the key point here. It was, almost, in Wang Ling's opinion, the grave god's ability to survive his trap was already amazing. Pingshiren had said that even Tao ancestor Wang had been afraid of the grave god back then. He had been so afraid that the grand cultivation ancestor had hunted him down throughout the universe. But in the end, the grave god hadn't died. He had just been divided into 2 parts and sealed away. Now, he had broken the seal again. Wang Ling felt that he had to be vigilant. In order to rescue Pingshiren, the grave god had used these 4 ancient divine weapons, which proved that he still had some foundation back then. But, was that all? Wang Ling somehow felt that there was some kind of conspiracy behind this. Senior, we can't hold on any longer. Seeing that the 4 ancient divine weapons were trapped, Chia Chihu shouted anxiously. He never expected that even this great senior from the grave god wouldn't be able to do anything to this youngster. Even his sword spirit couldn't restrain him. After all, that was just an ordinary-looking peachwood sword. But the gap in their combat strength was so huge. You're in too much of a hurry. The grave god's expression was calm. This peachwood sword is indeed stronger than I expected, but that's not what I meant when I said we could hold on. His ancient divine weapons had been specially forged for his conquest of the universe back then, so they were strong. But the grave goddess was also very clear about this. These 4 ancient divine weapons weren't enough to deal with Wang Ling. At this moment, he slightly closed his eyes and followed an aura that came from outside the inner world. Boom! The next moment, several 100 million light-years away from Earth, several tens of thousands of celestial bodies were pierced through by a pitch-black spear that was covered in runes and then exploded. Spiritual energy soared into the sky, creating a terrifying scene. At the same time, both inside and outside the inner world, Wang Ling and Golden Lamp also raised their heads. Feeling the fluctuation of this aura, this is On Earth, Jean Deng frowned. The familiar aura that came from outside the infinite Milky Way made him immediately raise his guard. He immediately moved and shrunk the ground to an inch, blocking this aura from rushing toward Earth in an attempt to intercept it. He's here. Inside the devouring star, the grave god opened his eyes and looked as if he had everything planned out. Everything was as he had expected. Monk Golden Lamp wanted to stop him. But could it be stopped? In the universe, a golden path that ordinary cultivators couldn't see appeared. It looked like a gorgeous carpet that had sprouted from the end of the universe. The creature standing on the golden carpet had 2 horns on its head and wide steel wings. It was currently only the size of an adult. But in fact, it was a condensed form. Its real body was hundreds of millions of meters tall. This was the second time the monk had seen it. It's really you. The monk's pupils contracted. The creature in front of him was none other. It was Tao Ancestor Wang's Dharma form. The creature called Ho. It was also one of the few very special Dharma forms that could move freely without the will of its master. Wang Ling instantly understood when this Dharma form appeared. It turned out that this was the grave god's plan from the beginning. He speculated. Back then, Tao Ancestor Wang had probably given the task of cleaning up the ancient divine weapons to his own Dharma forms. But some of them had been kept as a trump card. For example, the ones in front of him had hidden their auras very well, so they had escaped disaster. Now, the grave god had brought these ancient divine weapons out again. He didn't really want to rely on the power of the ancient divine weapons to delay them. His real goal was, he wanted to deliberately leak the aura of the ancient divine weapons to lure Ho here. Ho was Tao Ancestor Wang's biggest enemy. The grave god had a long-standing feud with this Ho. He knew this all too well, which was why he had taken advantage of it. Clearing up the ancient divine weapons and protecting Tao Ancestor Wang's only legacy, which was Peng Shiren, who was currently trapped in the king's eye, these were all tasks for Ho. Ho, Shiren is no longer the Shiren he used to be. You and I should both know this very well. This humble monk advises you to let go of your obsession and stop protecting him. Outside Earth, Monk Golden Lamp stood in front of the golden carpet and kindly advised Ho. Boom! Ho crossed his arms, and with a single thought, the aura of primal chaos burst forth in a flash of heavenly Tao. It gave off an endless aura of destruction. He didn't say a word. But his attitude was very clear. Although Tao Ancestor Wang was nowhere to be found, he would still do his best to complete the task that Tao Ancestor Wang had given him. Clearing up the ancient divine weapons. Protecting Peng Shiren. He wanted all of them. The insensible golden lamp monk stood in front of him, making him unhappy. He was just a little monk from back then, who had almost become Tao Ancestor Wang's disciple. If it hadn't been for the fact that Tao Ancestor Wang liked monks, Ho would have erased this rude monk long ago. Now, the little monk who had grown up back then was actually bold enough to stand in his way. Furious, Ho tried to use the ancient aura of destruction to kill the monk. However, Golden Lamp was no longer the same as it had been back then. This level of intimidation was useless. He had an agreement with Wang Ling. Even when Wang Ling wasn't around, he would do his best to protect Earth. And now, in the face of his former opponent, the monk just put his palms together and displayed the supreme Buddha's light of Buddhism. In an instant, the universe lit up. The Buddha's light and the 3-colored Buddha fire of the past, future, and present that the monk emitted seemed to have the power to illuminate everything. At that moment, even Ho was a little astonished. The little monk had progressed too quickly back then. Since you're so insensible, I'll have to kill you. The next second, Ho opened his mouth. With a wave of his hand, he summoned a pitch-black rune spear. Assuming a throwing posture, he abruptly threw it at the monk's head. With a rumble, space collapsed. This black spear was so terrifying that it forcibly split the space outside Earth in half, distorting it to form a series of new black holes. The monk frowned slightly. He just stretched out an index finger, which magnified infinitely in the universe, and blocked the spear's head. This was Monk Golden Lamp's rhinoceros finger. It was also the strongest finger technique that Tyrant could use at the moment. The two of them fought back and forth. Wang Ling was in the inner world, but he could already feel the spirit of Earth trembling. If this went on, sooner or later, all human cultivators would notice this battle on an alien planet. Helpless, Wang Ling sighed and could only use the power of the King's Eye again to amplify Peng Shi's power like a Wi-Fi amplifier. It directly extended into the universe. He sensed that the space around him had changed. Ho withdrew his rune spear and stopped. He hadn't expected other experts to actually exist. With a slight hesitation in his eyes, he looked in the direction of Earth. He saw Wang Ling in the inner world in the direction of Sun Island. Then, he looked at the monk, lost in thought, and asked, "Your disciple?" This question scared Monk Golden Lamp so much that he started sweating on the spot. Chapter 1536. He looked at Wang Ling from afar. In the inner plane, the young man sat paralyzed in front of the ruins, looking very tired. As his master, Monk Jin Deng chose to stop him, blocking his way. After thinking about it for a while, he felt that his deduction was completely reasonable. Yes, you were used. This penniless monk advises you to stop. Jin Deng stared at the steel-winged creature in front of him and frowned. Because the current situation was extremely unfavorable. Fortunately, Wang Ling had reacted quickly and used the King's Eye to expand the inner world to include more than half of the universe on the periphery of Earth as a part of the inner world. This was to prevent Tao Wu's next move from destroying the inner plane and affecting the real world. The inner world expanded under the radiation of the King's Eye. The width, thickness, and strength were all improved from the original foundation. Do I need you to teach me how to do things? His eyes were fixed on the monk. It was a pair of eyes filled with chaos. On the other hand, Qi was a great living being that was born from within the chaos, and its strength wasn't inferior to Tao Ancestor Wang's divine beast when it was just born. The stupid groundhog that was still stuck in an autistic state and hadn't been petrified. I'm just carrying out master's orders, said the Grim. This is blind loyalty, Jin Deng replied. They faced each other in space. In the next moment, Wang Ling realized that Grizzly's sharp claws were tightly gripping his rune spear, and instantly, a boundless aura of primal chaos was released. This was an extremely concentrated chaotic aura. It gave people the illusion that they were in chaos. This was the normal fluctuation of an ancestor-level expert, and given the monk's strength, he could naturally withstand it. However, this was equivalent to changing the environment around him, and any human cultivator, except Wang Ling, including the monk, would feel uncomfortable in the primal chaos Qi. Just like an outstanding diver, even if a monk could withstand the assault of the chaotic aura, there was still a limit. It was just that their speed was far higher than that of ordinary cultivators from Earth and the gods' domain. If it were anyone else, they would have already exploded under such fluctuations. It seems that you are no longer the little monk from back then. As a progenitor realm expert, you was very surprised by Tyrant's current growth. 10,000 years ago, the golden lamp would have lost consciousness in less than 5 seconds under his primal chaos Qi. In fact, whether it was innate talent, moral character, or every aspect, even the golden lamp surpassed Peng Shiren's. If he could get Tao Ancestor Wang's guidance, Monk Jin Deng could save himself a lot of detours. But what he couldn't understand was, in the end, Tao Ancestor Wang still chose Peng Shiren. Furthermore, he had ordered him to protect this one and only true inheritor. This was the mission that Tao Ancestor Wang had set down all those years ago, so Denglong naturally could not go against it. It was the same even if the golden lamp monk, who had grown up, stood in front of him. Clang! Therefore, in the next second, what awaited the monk was a terrifying rune spear surrounded by endless chaotic energy. The vast sky strike from before was just a test. This was his full strength. The chaotic energy that spread out was mixed with symbols that continuously dimmed and then lit up. It tore apart the sky, terrifying beyond compare as it pierced towards the golden lamp once more. Monk Jin Deng frowned and took out a golden wooden fish. Dang! He raised his hand and threw out the wooden fish. This wooden fish was enlarging at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then, it exploded with heavenly energy and fought against the long spear. "Monk, is that all you have?" Dang sneered and let out a loud battle cry. For a moment, the godly sound filled Wang Ling's ears. Endless pressure came crashing down. Even if it didn't reach Wang Ling, that terrifying sound wave instantly spread out in all directions. Wang Long. Wang Ling saw that the 4 ancient divine weapons suppressed by Jinka's sword talismans actually broke apart on the spot. The huge sound wave hit the ground, and Jinka's body was unsteady as he was actually sent flying. Wang Ling reacted quickly. He got up lightly, calculated Jinka's position, and held him in his arms like he was a doll. This was a sound technique that was specially designed to deal with ancient divine weapons. In order to be responsible for clearing out ancient divine weapons, Dang had studied a lot of methods. And this one was the most effective. These monsters, which were made of special materials bred out of chaos, weren't afraid of physical spells, but could be crushed with one blow at a specific frequency of sound waves. This specific sound wave, on the other hand, was harmless to creatures other than the ancient divine weapons, and wouldn't cause any injuries or deaths. At most, they would be knocked unconscious. To be honest, Dang's move inspired Wang Ling at the same time. It turned out that ancient divine weapons could be dealt with like this. He had learned it. After this battle roar, Dang's first task, which was to clear out the remnants of the ancient divine weapons, had been completed. All that was left was to rescue Peng Shiren. His distant battle roar was meant to crush the ancient divine weapons and knock Wang Ling unconscious in passing. But what Dang hadn't expected was, the ancient divine weapons had been destroyed. But that youngster and the white-haired sword spirit who looked like a child were both unscathed, and hadn't even lost a hair. "Your disciple isn't bad, monk," Dang said. This was a rare compliment. In the monk's memory, Swan rarely praised anyone. In fact, that battle roar just now hadn't just been Dang's test for Wang Ling. It was also Wang Ling's test for Dang. This already showed that this Tao ancestor Wang's Dharma form was different from the opponents Wang Ling had encountered before. Because Jinka was injured. The moment Wang Ling caught him, he had already sensed that Jinka had suffered internal injuries. Although it didn't show, it wasn't very serious. But Dang had been able to injure his sword spirit with just one battle roar. As far as Wang Ling could remember, this was indeed the first time this had happened. "Sword Master, I'm sorry." Held in Wang Ling's arms, Jinka felt a little ashamed as he felt Wang Ling use magic to heal him. Although Jinka had been injured this time because he had underestimated the enemy, but given the current situation, he really couldn't find any extra excuses to absolve himself. An injury was an injury. Wang Ling let out a soft sigh helplessly. The single-use talismans on him had started to burn again. Of the 90-odd talismans, more than 20 had already been destroyed. He knew that he shouldn't show off for a moment. He should save some single-use talismans. He still had the competition later on. But now, seeing Jinka injured, Wang Ling suddenly felt like his own son had been hammered. For some reason. He couldn't take it anymore. The next moment, Wang Ling raised his hand. Dang didn't understand what on earth this youngster was doing at that moment. But very quickly, he instantly understood. Because in the next moment, a tremendous force pressed down on his back. It was Earth. That youngster's palm actually split open the primal chaos and passed through layers of the void, carrying with it the aura of the great Tao that could split the heavens and the earth. Pressing down on his back, it slapped him toward Earth. Wang Ling's attack was too sudden. The mighty rules of the great Tao made Dang unable to react for a moment. He stared at Wang Ling. He couldn't figure out how a youngster could have such terrifying strength. He didn't even have time to block it. Dang's entire body had already passed through Earth's atmosphere with the force of the impact, and he charged toward Earth's surface. There was a loud bang. It was like a comet crashing into Earth. In front of Wang Ling, an incomparably huge sinkhole was smashed open. Chapter 1537. Bian climbed out of the sinkhole with a radius of hundreds of kilometers. His claws were clasped at the edge of the sinkhole, and he had mixed feelings. Growing up to this age, even Tao ancestor Wang had never beaten him. He didn't expect to be ambushed by the monk's disciple, and it even succeeded. Wang Ling strolled over and looked down at Pai. This was the Dharma life form of Tao ancestor Wang. It was indeed different from the enemies he had faced before. He had clearly been slapped on the back, but he didn't seem to have suffered any internal injuries. He just looked a little disheveled. If it was anyone else, they would have already vomited blood. Wang Ling pondered in his heart. He knew that a great battle was inevitable. In order to save the one-time use talismans on him, he removed the remaining 60 or so talismans and put them away for the time being. These single-use talismans were for the later matches. It would be a pity if it was used up in this battle. Seeing dusk climb out of the sinkhole, Wang Ling wanted to step on its toes. However, when he thought about how his foot would definitely be stained with a piece of meat paste, he retracted his foot. He was also wearing a pair of white shoes. Washing shoes was the most troublesome. If he used magic to clean it, the purification power would be too great, and it would easily deform the shoes. Thus, he was usually used to washing shoes himself. Don't think that I won't kill you just because you are the monk's disciple. After climbing out of the sinkhole, Ho quickly floated into the air. The black runic spear in his hand burst forth, and his entire body emitted a chaotic light that swept through the heavens and the earth. Wang Ling had rarely seen such a doomsday-like scene. More often than not, when Wang Ling made a move, the entire planet would disappear before the end of the world arrived. There was no doubt that, as the Dharma form of Tao ancestor Wang, the Hui possessed unparalleled power. In fact, such power was even more terrifying than Peng Shiren's. The strength of the Dharma idol was, in fact, a reflection of its owner's battle prowess. With such battle prowess, Tao ancestor Wang's battle prowess was definitely greater than his. At that moment, Peng Shiren, who was imprisoned in the king's eye, also looked at this scene in astonishment. He thought that after he stepped into the ancestral ancestor realm, he had already attained a level that surpassed his master, Tao ancestor Wang. But from the looks of it now, the gap between them still existed. This feeling of disparity made him feel helpless and unwilling. He didn't want to be restricted by the king's eye. But in this situation, he couldn't break free. Although it wasn't out of his own will, it seemed that the only person who could help him escape now was Bai. His towering rage caused his aura to grow even stronger. The entire inner world was filled with waves of sand, and the sky was filled with primal chaos granules. This was a phenomenon that occurred when primal chaos chi was raised to an extreme. The grains of sand were like a vast ocean that swept through the sky. The destructive power of the primal chaos grains was extremely terrifying. If an ordinary person were to be sucked into this storm of primal chaos grains, they would immediately be torn to pieces. This move was often used to clear the field, and also to test how strong Wang Ling's body was. In the end, the young man just stood there in the storm with his hands in his pockets. Even his bangs didn't move. After the unexpected and somewhat awkward opening, the surroundings fell into deathly silence once more. Jin Deng descended from space to take care of Jinka on the side. When he saw Wang Ling slap down Deng Long, the monk already knew that Wang Ling had decided to do it himself. This battle was unavoidable. He wanted to persuade her. But he found that he was stubborn. He couldn't be blamed. Everything Deng Long had done was because he was loyal to Tao ancestor Wang's orders. Perfected one. The monk's eyes lit up. He knew that Wang Ling had already sensed his thoughts. He was pleading for mercy on behalf of Deng Long, hoping that Wang Ling would be gentler and not kill Deng Long with just a few slaps. Although blind loyalty was indeed difficult to deal with. But Deng Long had quietly done a lot of things in space over the years that others couldn't do for him. He had also worked hard. Wang Ling understood this principle. To be honest, even if the monk hadn't said anything, Wang Ling didn't have any intention of killing Deng Long. He just wanted to teach this arrogant and conceited Dharma creature a little lesson, that was all. Besides, Deng Long was different from his previous opponents. This was different from his previous opponents, and Wang Ling actually wasn't confident that he could really kill or seriously injure Dusk with one slap. He looked at Deng Long. At that moment, there was only one thought in his mind. That was, in this battle, he might have to be a little more serious. Interesting. At that moment, Jin gripped the rune spear and said to the monk who was taking care of Jinka on the side, "Monk, this disciple of yours is indeed skilled. Of all the juniors I've fought against, I, Zheng, would like to call him the strongest." Wang Ling and Jin Deng, this misunderstanding was too deep. Jin Deng actually wanted to explain it clearly, but he didn't know how to start. Because his first reaction when he saw Wang Ling was, and Deng Long was the same now. He just felt that Wang Ling was too young. It was impossible for a teenager to be invincible in the world. Thus, Jin Deng felt that he really wasn't qualified to laugh at Deng Long. They were all experienced people. This matter didn't need much explanation. He just needed to take a few slaps to know. What a pity, monk. At that moment, Deng Long pointed the tip of his spear at Wang Ling. "Although your disciple is excellent, he will definitely fall here today." As soon as he said that, in an instant, a great battle had begun. Like the roar of a ferocious beast in the primal chaos, the scene in front of them changed as space and time went haywire. The space in front of Wang Ling exploded on the spot. There was a loud boom. The earth split open, stretching out endlessly in units of 10,000 black fissures spread continuously in all directions, and everywhere was a bottomless black abyss. Endless chaotic flames gushed out of the fissures. Earth ancestor level? Wang Ling frowned. At that moment, he indeed sensed Deng Long's true realm. A progenitor expert, and an earth ancestor at that. His strength was indeed extraordinary. This scene looked destructive and very grand, but in fact, this was just a basic operation of the earth ancestor level, and Deng Long hadn't completely taken it seriously. Wang Ling's thoughts at that moment were, fortunately, he had reinforced the inner world. Otherwise, it would have collapsed. The chaotic flames scorched the entire inner world, and Wang Ling's black hair was dyed fiery red. His king's eyes were even more fiery red. Wang Ling was displeased by this doomsday scene. The existence of the chaotic flames was actually very bad for Jinka. Wang Ling frowned slightly. Then, he started to activate his king's eye. A golden vortex overflowed from Wang Ling's pupils, and then doubled in size until it was like an artificial black hole that swallowed up all the chaotic things in front of it. Then, the chaotic inner world returned to calm. Is this the only way? Wang Ling stared at the Dharma creature whose pupils were greatly shaken, and had only one thing left to say. P.S. To sort out the realms again, foundation establishment, golden core, nascent soul, soul formation, itinerant immortal, true venerated, venerated immortal, sage immortal, Tao master, Tao god, Tao ancestor, human ancestor, earth ancestor, heavenly ancestor, ancestral king, ancestral immortal. Wang Ling. Chapter 1538. The king's eye instantly swallowed up the originally vast chaotic doomsday, and the raging flames of chaos were instantly extinguished, looking like lonely smoke in the desert. He withdrew the king's eye and immersed himself in it for only a few seconds. The next moment, there was a loud bang. Endless chaotic chi, accompanied by the flames of chaos, engulfed Dusk even more fiercely than before. This was the king's eye's charged counterattack, which had the effect of multiplying the damage. The longer Wang Ling held it in, the greater the power. He didn't dare hold it in for too long. If he held it in for a few minutes and used 100 times the power, the entire inner world's solar system might be instantly annihilated. This. Inside the king's eye, Peng Shiren saw this amazing scene. He had imagined how strong Wang Ling's king's eye would be. But the ability to instantly absorb spells and then double the damage. Peng Shiren had never seen it before. The scene in front of him was too horrifying. The flames of chaos spewed out by the king's eye were several times more powerful than Dusk's earlier outburst, and the blazing heat caused space to burn up on the spot, forming a large black hole. The fierce tongue of fire swallowed up the ground in front of it, and in an instant, everything within sight was scorched. A great deal of seawater evaporated, and for a moment, the whole world was filled with white mist. This move had hit Dusk squarely, but in the end, it was an ability that could return the favor several times over. Moreover, Dusk's own battle strength was extremely strong. This little bit of power probably couldn't hurt him. Wang Ling's move was both a deterrent and a coercive one. He wanted to make it look like Dusk had used all his strength. After all, he had never fought an Earth Progenitor realm being before. And he didn't know what the upper limit of his current strength was. If he could beat Dusk, then his strength should be above the Earth Ancestor realm, right? Who knew? Dusk's figure appeared again in the white mist, and he looked a little taller than before. He had grown to more than 3 meters tall, just like those ancient divine weapons. Although this huge figure looked terrifying, it didn't give Wang Ling any sense of oppression. The only difference was that he was wearing a pitch-black armor that was engraved with heavenly Tao runes. It's the Chaos Armor. Jin Deng frowned. He had a few encounters with Baiyan, so he was well aware of some of Baiyan's techniques. The Chaos Armor was extracted from the Chaos when Sui was born. It could be considered a gift from the Chaos. Even the Chaos Spear in his hand was an item of the Chaos. Chaos artifacts were a level stronger than world-defying artifacts. Now that the 2 Chaos items were in Ho's hands, his battle prowess was actually even stronger than a progenitor. After so many years, the Chaos Armor had been strengthened to a terrifying level under Zhui's constant refinement. It allowed Denglong to travel freely in the Primal Chaos and was immune to all damage from the Primal Chaos. In other words, the King's Eye's counterattack had failed. Dusk emerged from the fog. At that moment, the way he looked at Wang Ling had clearly changed. Then, he looked at Monk Jin Deng, who was standing timidly on the side and couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Why is your master weaker than your disciple? Jin Deng wanted to refute. But when he thought about it, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with what he said. Apart from their master-disciple relationship, he was indeed weaker than Wang Ling. But to hear this from Denglong, Jin Deng felt that Denglong had already acknowledged Wang Ling as his opponent. But it was clear that Denglong didn't understand the seriousness of the problem. Because Ling Jinren was Ling Jinren. Wang Ling. He had never needed someone to approve of him. In the next second, Denglong transformed the rune spear in his hand into a pair of boxing gloves that firmly covered his arms. He stopped probing with long-range spells, and directly switched to close combat. Clang! A simple and violent blow landed on Wang Ling's right arm, which he had used to block. It didn't hurt much, and only felt a little itchy. In contrast, after Denglong's blow, Wang Ling felt a series of pained cries in Denglong's heart. F***K. It hurts. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts, Wang Ling. But Denglong endured it and didn't directly show it. Then, Wang Ling still didn't make a move, and merely assumed a defensive posture. The two of them intertwined, and the battle looked particularly intense. In a short period of time, Denglong and Wang Ling exchanged hundreds of blows. Nobody has ever fought with sword master like this. On the side, Jinka's expression changed. Although he was just watching, he was also learning. As the #1 sword spirit under Wang Ling and the master of Sword King World, Jinka's potential had actually yet to be fully displayed. Looking at Jinka's serious little face, Monk was also horrified in his heart. As expected, this master and servant pair were both monsters. They could grow just by watching. It was like how a lot of slacker students who didn't listen well in class comforted themselves. In any case, what the teacher said was in the books, and since it was in the books, they could just go home and read. It didn't matter what class they were in, they could even slack off. But it turned out that there were some things that couldn't be understood by watching. Those who could understand could. Like Jinka, they were all freaks. Denglong's body movements, martial arts and combat skills were all very skilled and advanced. The amount of experience accumulated over the ages was unimaginable. At first, Monk Golden Lamp didn't understand why Wang Ling hadn't made a move, but had instead assumed a defensive posture. But at that moment, he saw Jinka studying on the side. He instantly understood what was going on. It turned out that Wang Ling had done it on purpose. He had deliberately let Danglong fight Danglong, thus giving Jinka a chance to learn on the side. To be able to understand just by watching, that was outrageous. But in a showdown between experts, both sides could sense each other. Wang Ling's obvious perfunctory attitude made Danglong furious. Do you only know how to defend? Aren't you very good at fighting? Come. Fight me. He clamored as he used Inch Punch to quickly attack with a magic weapon. In a short second, his fists were flying, and he could throw tens of thousands of punches. Wang Ling casually blocked him. At the same time, his clone observed Jinka's learning progress. The little guy's students were very fast. This was his sword spirit, so he knew best. After about 2 minutes of fighting Danglong, Wang Ling felt that Jinka's learning time was almost up. Boom! It was a punch without any magic, and it was the frontal attack Danglong had been waiting for. That's right. That's it. Come. Let me see how strong your punch is. Before he could finish the word, strong, Danglong's ecstatic gaze landed squarely on Danglong's abdomen. This was a punch that Danglong couldn't stop with the naked eye. He could throw tens of thousands of punches in a second, which was already extremely fast. Who knew how many times stronger than those female boxers? But Wang Ling's punches were even more ferocious. Before the naked eye could react, a punch was already aimed at Danglong's abdomen. What followed was a sharp pain in his abdomen, and he vomited blood like crazy. Cough. Purple blood sprayed out of Danglong's mouth. It was a very big mouthful, and when it fell to the ground, it immediately burned a pit that was millions of li deep. Wang Ling frowned. He hadn't expected Danglong's blood to have such powerful energy. Only now did he realize why the monk had asked him to go easy on Danglong and not kill him right away. On one hand, it was because of their old friendship. On the other hand, it was to prevent further damage to Earth. If Danglong died, he would definitely self-destruct. The destructive power brought about by the self-detonation might bring disaster to half of the universe. Just a mouthful of blood had such terrifying destructive power. If Danglong exploded like a watermelon, Wang Ling would have detonated a massive cosmic nuclear bomb. Clang! At that moment, there was a vibrating sound. Danglong took out a magic artifact that glowed purple. That was an ancient diagram that looked like an object from ancient times. It possessed a terrifying pressure. Was it another chaos artifact? The pressure from a chaos artifact was very strong. It was the most terrifying of all the magic artifacts Wang Ling had seen so far. Who knew how many times stronger it was than those world-defying magic artifacts? Go! Danglong gave a light shout, and the ancient diagram flew up to wrap around Wang Ling. The Supreme Corpse Winding Diagram. The monk recognized this magic artifact. This was one of Dao ancestor Wang's chaos artifacts back then. It was just that he hadn't expected this chaos artifact to actually appear in Danglong's hands. The Supreme Corpse Winding Diagram. Back then, Dao ancestor Wang had used this magic artifact to suppress countless powerful enemies. Furthermore, every successful suppression would cause the power of the corpse wrapping picture to increase exponentially. This was a magic artifact with no upper limit. It was ridiculously strong. Wang Ling was very strong. And Danglong had taken note of this, which was why he had taken out this magic artifact. If it could successfully suppress Wang Ling, who knew how many times this corpse winding diagram would be instantly strengthened, you can't escape. After taking out the corpse winding diagram, Danglong assumed the attitude of a spectator. Back then, there were many ancient experts who were suppressed by this corpse winding diagram. All of them had outstanding strength. In the end, they were all defeated by the corpse winding diagram. The strength of the corpse winding diagram can no longer be calculated in numerical terms. Danglong looked extremely confident. Ling Zhenren, be careful. You mustn't be caught by the diagram. Even the monk became nervous. In the history of chaos artifacts, the Supreme Corpse winding diagram's status was self-evident. Although the monk firmly believed in Wang Ling's strength, seeing Denglong take out the Supreme Corpse winding diagram at that moment, he still couldn't help giving a warning. Because in the long river of history, he had seen too many experts who had underestimated the Supreme Corpse winding diagram, and in the end had been suppressed. Hadn't those experts been able to make the sun and moon pale with a wave of their arms? However, they had all lost to the Supreme Corpse winding diagram. Just like the name of this magic artifact. Suppressed. And then smelted. Turned into a corpse that had been left behind through the ages. At that moment, when the Supreme Corpse winding diagram unfurled, the long diagram, which stretched for thousands of kilometers, was filled with the endless stench of blood and the aura of primal chaos. Wang Ling's pupils instantly contracted slightly. On the long scroll in front of him, countless white bones appeared, densely piled up on the corpse-wrapping picture. These were all experts who had been suppressed by the Supreme Corpse winding diagram. Trapped in the diagram, they had finally died after being drained of all their strength. Some of these white bones were sitting, indicating their powerlessness. 591 Netsum were standing, indicating their helplessness. And some were clinging to the edges of the diagram, as if they would climb out in the next moment. They had tried to break free of the corpse winding diagram, but failed, indicating their despair. Wang Ling actually hadn't expected this. There actually existed such an inhuman magic artifact in the universe. But these so-called chaos artifacts weren't man-made, but had been bred and refined from the primal chaos. Because they were limited in number, they were so powerful that they were precious. Each chaos artifact had its own independent intelligence, and it mainly depended on whether or not one had the ability to subdue them. When Dao ancestor Wang had obtained this corpse winding diagram back then, it hadn't been very powerful. But now, after so many years, it had devoured and drained so many experts. The corpse-wrapping painting was clearly worthy of the two words supreme in front. Forcibly suppressing Wang Ling. Then, it would use the power of the corpse winding diagram to release Peng Shiren, who had been sealed in the king's eye. This was Wang Ling's next step in his plan. You were able to force me to use the Supreme Corpse winding diagram. Wang Ling. I acknowledge your strength, Wang Ling said. Under Wang Ling's control, the long scroll was like a swimming dragon as it surrounded Wang Ling from all directions. Withdraw. The next second, Wang Ling's palm fiercely clenched, and the long scroll abruptly withdrew. But at that moment, Qi. With a soaring brown sword light, heaven and earth shook and flared up again. Wang Ling hadn't expected the sword spirit of the Peachwood sword, which had been injured by his battle cry, to attack again. You overestimate yourself. He sneered as he manipulated the corpse winding diagram to sweep it toward Jinka. This was a chaotic weapon that had been continuously growing throughout the ages. How could a little sword spirit who had just been born shake it? But in the next moment, the brown sword light in the air suddenly exploded. Tens of thousands of shooting stars fell from the sky like a cluster of exploding fireworks. In an instant, the corpse winding diagram collapsed on the spot. The long scroll was cut up and reduced to countless pieces of waste paper, and the fragments scattered all over the sky. Wang Ling was taken aback by this sudden scene. He could clearly sense that this little sword spirit's aura was different from before. In a short period of time, it had actually become stronger than before. What on earth was this? You destroyed my corpse winding diagram. You're courting death. With a loud roar, Wang rushed forward to meet Jinka's attack. Jinka saw the path of Wang Ling's fist, and easily dodged it with a sidestep. This body technique looked a little familiar to Wang Ling. Because it was Wang Ling's own body technique. And now, Wang Ling finally understood why Wang Ling hadn't fought him properly before. It turned out that all of this was to provide an opportunity for his sword spirit to teach him online. He was the spirit of Dao ancestor Wang's Dharma idol. He had actually been used by a youngster. Wang Ling couldn't help feeling like he was going to vomit blood. This feeling was like that psycho female painter who had received 2,900 yuan as a drawing fee, painted a work of 500 yuan, and publicly hung up a post saying that she had been bullied yesterday. Kuxuan was so angry that he almost had a brain hemorrhage. The Supreme Corpse winding diagram was a gift from Dao ancestor Wang. All these years, Wang Ling had used it carefully. But he never expected that today, the corpse winding diagram would actually be directly cut into pieces. "I'll fight you to the death." Wang Ling went berserk and charged forward recklessly. Jinka was also a little angry. Wang Ling's appearance earlier had caused him to lose face in front of Wang Ling. But now, he had gotten his revenge. But this clearly wasn't enough. "Scabbard, come." This time, it was Jinka himself who spoke. Under these extremely calm words, a peachwood sword scabbard suddenly appeared in the inner world. At the critical moment, Bai Qiao offered herself. It wasn't that Jinka felt that he couldn't beat Wang Ling now. Instead, he felt that in the face of Dao ancestor Wang's Dharma idol, he should show his complete form as a sign of respect. It wasn't because he wanted to fuse together that he had come up with this excuse. When Bai Qiao appeared, Wang Ling's face was full of disbelief. There was only one question mark in his heart. And that was, why did this scabbard have a spirit? The scabbard and the sword were originally inseparable. It was impossible for there to be both a sword spirit and a scabbard spirit. But the scene in front of him was clearly beyond Wang Ling's understanding once again. Disregarding everything else, he charged at Jinka. After a flash of snow-white light, the figure of a youngster slightly older than Jinka appeared in front of him. The youngster was wearing a white Daoist robe, his snow-white hair dancing in the wind, and the hair protruding from the top of his head was particularly dazzling. His gaze was condescending, and with an air of arrogance, he reached out and grabbed Ho's fist, squeezing it tightly in his palm. When Wang Ling saw this scene, he already knew that there was no longer any suspense in the following battle. Wang Ling didn't even want to kill him. Wang Ling probably wouldn't even be able to break through Jingbai's defense. White snow started to fall in the inner world. The snow contained primal chaos qi. Wang Ling had always been sensitive to chaos, so he could sense it. "Who are you?" From the primal chaos snow, Wang Ling sensed that the sword spirit in front of him, which had been reborn after the fusion, had an extraordinary origin. He frowned and stared at Jingbai. "You don't have the right to know," Jingbai retorted. He stood with his hands behind his back, his face as white as jade, and when he spoke, there was a sense of the vastness of the great Tao. "No one has ever spoken to me like this. You're too confident." Wang Ling snorted. When he had been invincible in the world, Jingbai probably hadn't even been born yet. Actually, he couldn't quite figure out why Jingbai had the guts to talk to him like this. But in the next moment, Jingbai looked at him coldly. "It's over." In his bland voice, a sword light mixed with brown and white was born from Jingbai's fingertips with the power to split heaven and earth. The intense sword intent stretched for billions of miles and affected the entire solar system. All the planets shrank and trembled when they felt it. Although this battle was in the inner world, this fluctuation was so strong that it permeated everything. Everyone outside the inner world suddenly felt a chill run down their spines. At that time, all the people on Earth who had inexplicably shivered because of Jingbai's sword qi, which had permeated both inside and outside the inner world. This sword light was indomitable and stretched for who knew how many tens of thousands of miles, vast and boundless. Wang Ling couldn't understand it at all. How could a sword spirit have such terrifying power? The earth began to split apart, and the spirit of the earth in the inner world howled in pain, as if a kitchen knife had been stabbed into its abdomen and was slowly slicing it apart. Boom! Following that, bolts of white lightning appeared in the sky, boundlessly chaotic. The sound was louder than anyone could imagine, and countless snow-colored lightning dragons were roaring. The sound seemed to come from eternity, and it was terrifying. At that moment, Wang Ling's expression finally changed as he looked at Jingbai. You're from eternity?" He had seen all the experts in eternity, but he didn't remember such a person. "You're thinking too much." Jingbai's face was as calm as an ancient well, and he only snorted. "Impossible. You're definitely an eternity figure. And your master too. How can you only be 16 years old? Wang Ling and Jingbai in front of him increasingly felt that their origins were extraordinary. Are you trying to excuse your failure? This king has seen a lot of trash. I thought you were different, but I didn't expect you to be no different from those trash. You know you're going to lose, so you're just looking for excuses. Jingbai frowned slightly. Have you never thought that we just look older? Wang Ling was speechless for a moment. Even if they looked older, they couldn't be eternally old. The two people in front of him were obviously at the level of eternity. However, many of those eternally strong experts had already been suppressed in that supreme corpse shrouding painting just now. Come down. You're not fit to stand in the same void as this king. Chapter 1539. To be honest, although the chaos armor and the corpse wrapping diagram were chaos weapons, they were just two toys in Wang Ling's eyes. When he had been chased by the corpse picture earlier, he had looked weak, but in fact, he had been giving Jinka, who had fused with Bai Qiao and become Jinka, a chance. As it turned out, Wang Ling's thinking was correct. It was rare to have a good coach who could make Jinka suffer at the start. Such an experience would probably be difficult to encounter in the future. The stronger you meet, the stronger you become. This was the reason why Jinka could become the Sword King World King, and also the reason why Jinka could become the #1 spirit sword under Wang Ling's command. The super high growth potential of S+ level brought with it a powerful learning ability. In the sword spirit circle, Jinka's strength could be said to be unmatched. Wang Ling felt that the main reason he had lost this battle was because he had made too many unnecessary movements and talked too much nonsense. Too much time had been given. Perhaps your battle strength was indeed stronger than Jinka's a second ago. But if he didn't kill Jinka right away, but the next second, when Jinka's battle strength surpasses yours after learning it, you'll be the one to be destroyed instead. But after thinking it over, he didn't say this battle summary aloud. This was because it seemed to be a problem that everyone who fought against them had. After Jingbai brought up his request for the heavenly hybrid stone, Wang Ling's expression changed slightly. Su's reaction was actually very surprising. Because it seemed that not only was it very familiar with this kind of stone, but it also gave people the illusion that this stone seemed to be very common. What exactly is this heaven stone? On the side, Monk Jin Deng couldn't help stepping forward and asking, if you can provide the heavenly hybrid stone, Ling Zhenren might release Shiren. Not only that, he might even be able to repair your 2 torn chaos artifacts. Repairing chaos artifacts? Bai laughed. Monk, are you joking? You and I both know what a chaos tool is. The Supreme Corpse shrouding diagram and my primal chaos armor have already been destroyed. It's impossible to repair them. Tyrant spread his hands and put on an expression that said, believe it or not, it's up to you. No one spoke, instead quietly waiting for Tian to explain the origin of the heaven hybrid stone. What kind of past did this mysterious black stone, which Wang Ling had been thinking about for a long time, have? Even he was very curious about it. Do you still remember when the Tao ancestors' cultivation level regressed during the endless ages? Swan and I spoke. The blood on his body had already dried up, and when he spoke, his body exuded a strong aura of kidney deficiency, as if it was difficult for him to even breathe. He had died. The indestructible black fur on his arms, chest, and body was burned to a crisp by Jingbai's sword qi. If not for the seriousness of the topic. The monk felt that he couldn't help but laugh out loud. He sat down cross-legged, adjusting his breathing as he spoke. He had completely given up on fighting Wang Ling. Although Wang Ling hadn't summoned his Dharma body spirit, he had to admit that the youngster in front of him was indeed ridiculously strong. He hadn't even defeated the sword spirit under the other party, so how could he possibly be a match for this youth? Is the regression of the realm related to the heaven hybrid stone? The monk frowned after hearing Yu's words. Because in his impression, Tao ancestor Wang's realm was constantly advancing and retreating. It wasn't that it was unstable, but that Tao ancestor Wang would sometimes court death by experimenting with some new spells or exploring some unknown territory, so his realm would often regress. But Tao ancestor Wang was, after all, a pioneer of cultivation civilization. Even if his realm regressed, it wasn't a big deal. Because he could cultivate it back. And it wouldn't be for too long. Lord Dao Ancestor's realm regressing has happened from time to time, but that time in the endless ages was the most serious. Don't you have any suspicions, monk? Swan and I asked. What on earth happened? The heaven hybrid stone changed, and cracks appeared. Dao Ancestor had to think of a way. Hearing this, the monk frowned. The so-called heaven hybrid stone referred to the very center of the universe's chaos. It was always quiet there, and if something happened, the land of chaos would expand recklessly into the universe. The dark matter hidden in the universe would erupt completely, and all the living beings in the universe would be annihilated. Then the heaven hybrid stone cracked. The monk asked. But he didn't think it was that simple. If it was just a story about Nuwa mending the heavens, it would indeed be a little disappointing. Back then, a mysterious object appeared in the heaven hybrid stone. Dao Ancestor said that if it was obtained by someone with ulterior motives, it would bring disaster to all the living beings in the universe. Since then, Dao Ancestor has been thinking of a way to seal this mysterious object. What on earth is it? You're his Dharma form, but you've never seen it before? I can't see what it looks like at all. Even Dao Ancestor can't see it clearly. Swan sighed. During that time, Dao Ancestor went deep into danger to look for the heaven hybrid stone. He also fabricated the heavenly Dao magic cube and set it up in various parts of the universe. He said it was to restrain the chaos, but in fact, it was all to suppress this mysterious object. But what on earth is it? I don't know. Swan and I shook his head. Dao Ancestor called it the mandate of heaven. Whoever obtains it can obtain the mandate of heaven. I see. At that moment, Jingbai nodded. In other words, that heaven hybrid stone was brought here by Dao Ancestor Wang to restrain the mandate of heaven. That's right. Swan and I said, I don't know where Dao Ancestor brought it, but I do have some left. This thing has a powerful sealing power. Don't you feel uncomfortable? Not at all. Swan and I said, because I have pica. He would often eat some strange things. As a result, I get very serious constipation. Everyone, Swan and I said, sometimes, if you use too much force, you'll take off like a jet. So, it's better to say that this heaven hybrid stone helped me. There's one in every bathroom in my mansion. Everyone, clearly, this was a tasteful scene. Just listening to it, even Wang Ling couldn't help frowning. If you want the heaven hybrid stone, I can provide it. But the prerequisite is that you release Shiren. This is my agreement with Master. Please don't make things difficult for me, Swan and I said. Saying that, he took out a black box, and with a shake of his fingers, it landed in Wang Ling's hand. The black stone inside is the size of an egg. If you still don't think it's enough, I'll go back to my mansion's bathroom to get some more. That's enough. Wang Ling took the black box. Then, he used his Swan and I power to release Peng Shiren's soul according to their agreement. After Peng Shiren was released, his face was full of curses. Just as he was about to speak, Swan and I covered his mouth. Then, with a loud "pa" sound, Swan and I slapped him across the face. Swan and I was furious. Wastrel. For you, I destroyed 2 chaos weapons. Peng Shiren had never felt so aggrieved before. But now, he could only endure it. At the same time, Peng Shiren hadn't expected Swan and I to appear this time. He had thought that Dao Ancestor Wang would disappear. As the spirit of the aspect, Swan and I would also disappear. But he hadn't expected Swan and I to actually appear in front of him as an independent entity, and, what on earth was that mysterious thing called destiny? This time, Peng Shiren felt that he had lost. But there were many new ideas in his mind. Chapter 1540. Wang Ling watched as dusk and Peng Shiren left. Peng Shiren was about 185 meters tall, yet he was easily lifted up by one arm, even souls had weight. Although Peng Shiren's cultivation was nothing compared to Wang Ling's, his soul was still very heavy. He carried him like carrying a chick, and she herself was more like a hen protecting her chick. He couldn't help falling into deep thought at the scene in front of him. This strong sense of déjà vu caused him to sigh in his heart. The fight with Bai could be considered an accident. At the same time, he was flabbergasted at how easily he had obtained the black stone that he had been longing for. Although the process was full of twists and turns, at least the result was within expectations. Wang Ling opened the black box in his hand and stared at the pitch-black heaven hybrid stone inside, which was surging with chaotic qi. Like before, his king's eye was unable to see through the essence of this heaven hybrid stone. Furthermore, he could clearly feel that his strength had been greatly suppressed by the heavenly hybrid stone. However, it was said to be gigantic. Even if he was suppressed, Wang Ling was still very strong. As for this black box, it was specially made by me. It had the ability to block the radiation of the heaven hybrid stone. Generally speaking, the heaven hybrid stone had the effect he wanted. But he couldn't use it right now. Because the radiation from the mixed heaven stone was too strong. When this black box was open, it didn't just radiate Wang Ling, even the monk and Jingbai next to him felt a strong sense of oppression. It wasn't long before Jingbai actually separated from the stone's radiation. It returned to the body and scabbard of the peachwood sword. Whether it was Jinka or Bai Qiao, their faces were clearly very pale at that moment, as if they had just been seriously ill. Danger! Seeing this, Wang Ling hurriedly closed the black box again, and it was only then that everyone felt relieved and relaxed. The radiation from this heavenly hybrid stone was too strong. Don't talk about yourself. Even people at Jingbai and the monk's level of combat strength could feel the pressure. If this was used on Earth, this egg-sized heaven hybrid stone alone could probably kill many cultivators on Earth, so if Wang Ming wanted to study the heavenly hybrid stone next, he would probably have to start with this black box that blocked its radiation. Given Wang Ming's ability, he felt that he could definitely do it. At this moment, in the inner world, Peng Shiren's aura had completely disappeared. They were free from the shackles of the inner world. The monk frowned, feeling vaguely uncomfortable. Does Ling Zhenren also feel it? Wang Ling nodded. The golden lamp had always been sensitive. This was especially true when it came to speculations about fate. He felt that Bai would suffer a calamity if he returned with Peng Shiren this time. While he was injured, he had also lost 2 chaos weapons that could be used to save his life. This is the weakest moment of the present. Peng Shiren himself certainly did not expect that his master's Dharma aspect life form would still exist independently after his master had disappeared for so long. In terms of battle prowess, Peng Shiren was definitely no match for Deng Long. But now that he was injured, it was hard to say. This was because Peng Shiren still had the grave goddess. Wang Ling had never been a busybody. But it was just as the monk had said. The existence of Hui was actually necessary. At this thought, he took a few steps forward and looked at the mess on the ground. The primal chaos armor and the black armor had been completely cut into pieces. These fragments were quietly embedded in the ground of the inner plane, like withered black rose petals, exuding the light before they completely withered. Some golden paper scraps scattered around these fragments were the mess left behind by Jingbai's shredding of the corpse wrapping picture. These 2 chaos weapons were of utmost importance to Bai. Now that they had been destroyed, Bai's cultivation would be greatly damaged. At that moment, Wang Ling's king's eye was dyed gold. The 8 characters spell was activated at that moment. The 3 golden lotuses in his eyes turned clockwise, and powerful eye power overflowed to cover the mess in front of him. This is... The monk was stupefied. This was the first time he had seen Wang Ling use this kind of technique. What astonished him even more was the eye technique itself. Existence and non-existence, reality and illusion coexist. It could actually turn reality into illusion, and illusion into reality. Was this still a human ability? The monk's mouth dropped open in astonishment. This eye technique could put a person in an invincible position. Previously, Wang Ling had chosen to keep a low profile and had never used it in front of the monk. Now, Monk Jin Dang was astonished. Very quickly. With the use of his eye power, the chaos armor and the corpse wrapping picture were repaired. Wang Ling gave the chaos armor to the monk to deal with. The monk was familiar with Bai, so he would be able to find out Bai's whereabouts this time. Repairing chaos weapons wasn't Wang Ling's job. It could only be considered a small gift from Bai after he voluntarily handed over the heavenly hybrid stone. As for the corpse wrapping picture, Wang Ling needed to study it for a while. As Bai had said before, this supreme corpse wrapping picture contained many of the ancient experts who had been suppressed back then. Wang Ling felt that he might have a way to communicate with these ancient experts, and thus further understand the secrets of the ancient era. Don't worry, Ling Zhenren. I'll do it right away. After accepting the chaos armor, Jin Dang was deeply aware of its power. So in the next second, he took a step forward. His entire body directly disappeared from the inner world. He should be able to catch up, right? Wang Ling pondered this. Looking at the mess in the inner world, he sighed silently in his heart, and then returned to reality. Although the battle just now seemed to have gone on for a long time, there was still a difference in the flow of time between the inner world and reality. In fact, in reality, Wang Ling had just been in a daze. About 10 minutes later, Wang Ling calmly put his hands in his trouser pockets and stepped out of the secret room almost at the same time as Lotus Sunday. He had deliberately timed it so that he didn't appear to be too early in the challenge. But he hadn't expected that Lotus Sun's idea would actually be the same as his, and even their timing was surprisingly the same. Seeing Lotus Sun nod at him, Wang Ling was about to walk over. In the end, he was intercepted by another girl on the way. This person was none other than Matsushita Shingha, who had been possessed by Peng Shiren. Wang Ling had saved him back then, and before he left, he hadn't forgotten to add an illusion spell to tamper with Matsushita Shingha's memory. Matsushita Shingha and Lotus Sun, who was playing Ryoko Q, had been at loggerheads before the start of the competition. When the two women appeared in the same scene, they attracted a lot of attention. Everyone thought that Matsushita Shingha was going to declare war on Lotus Sun, who was playing Ryoko Q. In the end, at that moment, the girl blushed as she grabbed Lotus Sun's hand and said shyly and a little domineeringly, "Classmate Ryoko Q. I like you." Lotus Sun, Wang Ling dropped his forehead into his hand. He really hadn't expected things to turn out like this. Chapter 1541. The sudden confession caught Lotus Sun off guard. She did not know what had happened to cause Matsushita Galaxy's attitude towards her to undergo such a drastic change. However, Matsushita Galaxy's serious expression made her feel at a loss as to what to do. Although she had been trying her best to play the role of Ryoko Kumiya, she had never thought of finding a girlfriend for Ryoko Kumiya. If Senior Audjua found out about this, that would be terrible. In this situation, Lotus Sun felt that it was better for her to directly refuse. Compared to Matsushita Galaxy liking her, she felt that it was better for the girl in front of her to continue hating her. After careful consideration, she imitated Kamiya Ryoko and pulled away Matsushita Galaxy's hand from her arm. She then turned her head and snorted. "Matsushita Galaxy, I don't like girls. It's impossible between us." In the end, it was one thing for Matsushita Galaxy to not say it out loud. After he said it, he was as happy as a lotus. "Ah. Thank you, Ryoko Kamiya. I will do my best." Lotus Sun. Matsushita Galaxy was genuinely happy. This happiness was not feigned. Everyone knew that Kamiya Ryoko was a tsundere. Even if he liked something, he wouldn't express it. The more they liked someone, the more they would hide their feelings behind their hatred. Then, he was directly rejected. Isn't that what Kamiya Ryoko means? On the side, Wang Ling marveled at such mystical logic. While Matsushita Galaxy was still pestering Lotus Sun, he quietly returned to the waiting room with his hands in his pockets. Wang Ling felt that it was better not to get involved in a battle between girls. Moreover, Matsushita Shingha liked Ryoko Kamiya, So what did that have to do with Lotus Sun? Given Lotus Sun's intelligence, Wang Ling felt that she would definitely be able to escape successfully in the end. After the secret room escape was divided into groups. In the end, the 16 people who took the shortest time successfully advanced. Wang Ling, Lotus Sun and Matsushita Galaxy were all on the list. In the waiting room, Matsushita Galaxy sat next to Lotus Sun, gazing at her lovingly. Lotus Sun put her hand to her forehead. He didn't expect things to develop to this point. In a moment of desperation, she forgot that Kamiya Ryoko also had this tsundere attribute. She shouldn't have said humph when she refused. But he didn't expect that he would pay the wrong price in the end. She wanted Songsha Galaxy to think that he had feelings for her. But given the current situation, Lotus Sun felt that she should focus on the bigger picture. If he tried to explain too much, he might expose himself. He might as well beat her at her own game and let the misunderstanding continue. Before leaving Sun Island, she would think of a way to explain things to Matsushita Galaxy. On the other hand, when the top 16 of Jodao and high school were announced, in the mansion of the Jogong family, many people who heard the news could not help but be tempted. Yoshiko is back? How is that possible? Hideshi Komiya almost choked on his own saliva when he heard the news. Miss Yoshiko has indeed returned. The one-eyed warrior replied. In fact, he also felt very strange about this. He ordered his 3 most profitable subordinates, 1 circle, 2nd circle, and 3rd circle, to investigate this matter. Sure enough, they found information on Jogong Yoshiko's application for a return boat, which confirmed that she had come back on a private immortal boat. Furthermore, the one-eyed warrior had already verified this information, so it definitely wasn't fake. This wasn't the first time Wang Ming had dealt with the matter of altering information. To Wang Ming, this information was nothing more than a string of data. Furthermore, he had already subdued the Mahjong trio on Sun Island, so all the clues were connected, and there was no way to find any mistakes in it in a short period of time. Neither Hideshi Komiya nor this one-eyed warrior would have expected this. It had only been a few days since the people from number 60 high school arrived on Sun Island, but they had already subdued their most trusted subordinates. Why would Yoshiko come back at this time, just to participate in the competition? In his wheelchair, Hideshi Komiya frowned. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that there was something fishy about this matter. Don't tell me she pretended to be here to participate in the competition, but actually came here specifically to snitch on father about the riot in the ghost book. Miss Yoshiko doesn't seem like the type to snitch. Besides, she actually doesn't have direct evidence of the riot in the replica ghost book. The one-eyed warrior said, without absolute certainty, Miss Yoshiko would never alarm the master. But why on earth did she choose to come back at this time? Hideshi Komiya narrowed his eyes. Is it possible that she's pretending? The one-eyed warrior frowned. Actually, it wasn't that he hadn't suspected the possibility of it being a disguise. But all the evidence now pointed to the fact that the person in Jodao High School was Yoshiko Komiya. On one hand, the student registration information had come back. On the other hand, the students around them didn't seem to have noticed anything unusual. In fact, the one-eyed warrior had planted an informant in Jodao High School. I planted an informant among Jodao High School students, and he believes that this person is without a doubt Yoshiko Komiya, said the one-eyed warrior. Hideshi Komiya nodded. I know you've planted someone among Jodao High School students, but you never told me who it was. Do you remember the Matsushita family? You mean the family that sells electronic spirit beasts? Hideshi Komiya's eyes lit up. The Matsushita family's electronic spirit beasts enjoyed a certain reputation around the world. They didn't need to be fed, and they only needed to provide a spirit stone to last for a long time. There were electronic spirit beasts for home use, and there were also electronic spirit beasts for combat. However, due to mechanical limitations, the average combat strength of electronic spirit beasts wasn't too high. The strongest combat model was only at the Golden Core stage. There was still a lot of room for improvement in the future. If the material problem could be solved, the Matsushita family's electronic spirit beasts would most likely enter the cultivation arms industry. As for why Hideshi Komiya was so familiar with the Matsushita family, the reason was very simple. Because the Komiya family had always viewed the Matsushita family as a competitor, the hegemony of Sun Island was currently held by the Komiya family. But could they sit there for a long time? In fact, it still depended on the efforts of the younger generation. Someone from the Matsushita family is actually your informant? That's second Miss Matsushita Galaxy. She's my disciple. When did you take in such a disciple? Hideshi Komiya was shocked. A disciple in the game, said the one-eyed warrior. I met her in Sword Net 33. Hideshi Komiya looked incredulous. I remember that this Matsushita Galaxy is also in the top 16 this time. Yes. The one-eyed warrior nodded. My disciple has always regarded Ryoko Komiya as his target, and has done some research on her. I definitely won't make a mistake. A person who was supposed to be in Huashio Nation had suddenly and soundlessly appeared on Sun Island. Furthermore, everything had been flawless without the slightest mistake. Hideshi Komiya felt like he had seen a ghost. The truth was that the people in the Jogong family felt like they had seen a ghost. Hideshi Komiya wasn't the only one. Chapter 1542. It was now the wee hours of Friday, December 18th. However, in order to select a 5-member delegation as soon as possible, Kyoto still chose to hold the competition overnight. It wasn't a big deal for a cultivator to cultivate for several months without sleep. At most, they would just go bald. For ordinary people, staying up late wasn't something they could endure. It could lead to kidney deficiency, night sweats, fatigue, poor mental state, poor memory, high blood pressure and so on. What are you looking at? I'm talking to you. Wang Ling and Lotus Sun were waiting in the waiting room, and Matsushita Galaxy was very attentive next to them. Classmate Ryoko, are you hungry? Do you want a midnight snack? Midnight snack? Lotus Sun was blank. Losing weight was a girl's lifelong career. And something as evil as midnight snacks had always been a girl's natural enemy. The main thing was that Lotus Sun herself was convinced that Wang Ling didn't like chubby girls, so maintaining a good figure was very important. Of course, there were times when Lotus Sun also hoped that her fat content could go up a little, but that her basic figure could remain the same. Let the fat go where it should go, maybe this was what every girl wanted to do. Lotus Sun thought in her heart. Actually, she was quite satisfied with her situation so far. At the very least, compared with Ryoko Q, she suddenly felt a little heavier. That's right. I know a 24-hour fish ball shop next to the school. It's really delicious. And it's stuffed with papaya cheese. No need, classmate Matsushita Galaxy. Lotus Sun refused. All right. I'll go prepare a midnight snack. Classmate Ryoko, you don't have to be so polite with me. Matsushita Galaxy smiled, as if he was looking at a lover. Saying this, she hurriedly took out her phone, as if calling for a servant to buy it for her. The truth was that Wang Ming had sent Matsushita Galaxy's information to Lotus Sun and Wang Ling a few minutes ago. They now knew that this Matsushita Galaxy in front of them was also a young lady. Although she was the second oldest in the family, she was deeply loved by the head of the Matsushita family. Furthermore, the Matsushita family and the Ryoko family were currently competitors. After hearing this news, Lotus Sun dropped her forehead into her hand. She instantly felt like she was looking up at the starry sky. What had she done? She had actually helped classmate, Ryoko Q, conquer the second young lady of the rival family. At this moment, Lotus Sun's mood was extremely complicated. She tried her best to show that she was resisting. The main reason was to tell Wang Ling, actually, he wasn't from that faction. She was thinking of the bigger picture, not the bigger picture. At this time, Matsushita Galaxy, who was giving her a headache, walked over and looked at her with a doting expression. Ryoko-san, are you thirsty? Do you want me to order some milk tea? This time, Lotus Sun's reply became more cautious. If he refused again at this time, she felt that Matsushita Galaxy would do the opposite. So why not just agree and give it a try? Lotus Sun imitated Ryoko's tone and said, then. I'll have a small cup. Matsushita Galaxy became even more excited. Ah. Yoshiko. You actually agreed to my request so honestly. I knew it. My efforts will definitely be reciprocated. Lotus Sun was momentarily speechless. Then, she saw Matsushita Galaxy taking out his mobile phone and ordering his servants around. Yes. It's me again. Now, I want you to go to the nearest ranch and pick out a cow. That's right. It's best if you bring the cow directly to school. Ryoko-san wants to drink milk tea. That's right. Apart from the cow, get me a milk tea master. It has to be the best. It doesn't matter how expensive it is. What? Can't find a master? What are you doing? Don't we have so many electronic spirit beasts at home? If I remember correctly, don't we all have information on the owner of the electronic spirit beast? Matsushita Galaxy said, that's right. What I mean is for you to connect to the electronic spirit beast remotely and have it bring the milk tea master here. Student Matsushita Galaxy, I think I won't drink this milk tea. Lotus Sun was really scared. Even she had never heard of drinking milk tea in this way. It was too hardcore. Ah, Ryoko-san, don't be polite with me. We're going to be a loving family in the future. Chirp. Matsushita Galaxy acted cute. Wang Ling and Lotus Sun, after about half an hour, all the contestants were in position. The final round of 16 was about to begin. This was already the final battle. Leek Saki directly read out the rules of the competition through the central broadcasting room. Next, the contestants would be divided into two groups for an 8v8 battle royale. The entire process would be carried out using a point system. The 5 people on the winning side with the highest contribution points would be the members of the 5-member delegation this time. Wang Ling and Lotus Sun were on the red side. Wang Ling wasn't familiar with most of the people in his team. The only one he was familiar with was the rather annoying peacock. Matsushita Galaxy, on the other hand, was on the blue side. Lotus Sun breathed a slight sigh of relief. As long as they won the next round, Matsushita Galaxy wouldn't interfere with the rest of the competition. In the blink of an eye, Lotus Sun was on the opposite side of Matsushita Galaxy. Wang Ling had thought that Matsushita Galaxy would definitely be in a bad mood. In the end, it was the opposite. She actually looked very happy. Even when she went on stage, she cupped her face and looked at Lotus Sun with an intoxicated expression. Ah. I knew I wouldn't be on the same team as Ryoko-san. I'm on the blue team, you're on the red team. Isn't there a saying that since ancient times, red and blue make up? Lotus Sun took a deep breath and asked curiously, what if I was on the same team as you? Then we'd be a match made in heaven. Matsushita Galaxy smiled. Hearing this, Lotus Sun couldn't help shuddering. As the saying went, everything had its vanquisher. Until today, it seemed that Lotus Sun had finally discovered the biggest nemesis in her life, Ku. The warning sounded as the match began. The competition officially began in the gymnasium of Kyowa High School. Wang Ling was waiting solemnly. Although he had already peeled off the single-use talismans and put them back on, he still had to carefully control his strength. The worst thing to do in a chaotic situation was to bump into something. It wasn't that Wang Ling was afraid of hurting himself. It was that he was afraid of accidentally killing someone. 9 Tails mode. With Matsushita Galaxy's delicate shout, the girl swiftly pulled her hair into 9 ponytails. Stimulated by the acupuncture points on his scalp, Matsushita Galaxy's aura soared. His battle strength soared. As expected of the blue team's main fighting force. I didn't expect student Matsushita Galaxy to be so serious from the start. It looks like he really wants to represent the school in the competition. In the central control room, Leek Sasaki marveled repeatedly. Because he rarely saw it. Matsushita Galaxy was in 9 Tails mode. Lotus Sun frowned slightly at this scene. Everyone thought that this would be a white-hot match. But to everyone's surprise, less than a minute after the match began, there was a series of screams from the blue team. "Student Matsushita Galaxy, what are you doing? I'm your teammate." "I know. I'm your teammate. You won't get points for hitting me. And we'll all get points deducted." "I know. I'm hitting you guys." In the huge gymnasium, Matsushita Galaxy was like a little leopard as he chased after the other 7 members of the blue team. As he ran, he shouted, "Ryokoko-chan is going to the competition. I'm protecting her." Wang Ling and Lotus Sun. Chapter 1543. Girls who fell in love were terrifying. In the gym, Wang Ling directly experienced the power of generating electricity with love. In Nine Tails mode, Matsushita Galaxy was like a god of death on the battlefield. In the central control room, Leek Sasaki was dumbfounded. The situation in front of him was completely unexpected. He hadn't expected this at all. At that moment, the people on the blue team didn't know whether to fight back or not. If they fought back, they would be attacking their teammates, which would only worsen the situation. Matsushita Galaxy was chasing 7 people on his own, and his points were already being deducted. It had only been a few minutes since the start of the game, but he had already lost dozens of points. If they fought back, the negative points would only increase. "No. We have to fight back." After being chased for a while, the 7 people finally decided to grit their teeth and work together to send Matsushita Galaxy away first. As long as this crazy woman was on the team, there was no way they could win. Although Matsushita Galaxy was the main force, she was too much of a hindrance now. It would be better to send her away first, and then think of a way to earn back their points. What a crazy woman. Someone on the blue team angrily rebuked Matsushita Galaxy for beating up a teammate. It was a boy whose clothes had been torn to shreds by Matsushita Galaxy, and he had been hit in the chest with a palm. It made his blood boil. It was like watching a TV show about a green tea bitch seducing a scumbag. The boy remembered that his mother had been watching this show for the last few nights, and he had watched it with her, often feeling so angry that blood clogged his heart. Now, he had been hit in the chest by Matsushita Galaxy in Nine Tails mode. Under this pincer attack, the boy finally couldn't take it anymore. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. At that very moment, the situation was already hopeless. "Classmate Jia Xian Dai. Wake up!" The remaining people on the blue team shouted. Unfortunately, the boy who had fainted after spitting out blood had already fainted. The referee immediately flew to the boy's side, released a healing spray, and carried him away. This meant that this classmate called Jia Xian Dai had been completely defeated. The blue team had originally wanted to work together with the 7 of them to deal with Matsushita Galaxy, but now that one of them had been directly eliminated, they couldn't guarantee their combat strength. On the other hand, Matsushita Galaxy looked like a devil with her 9 ponytails fluttering in the wind. This kind of acupoint piercing technique is actually very harmful to the body. I didn't expect Matsushita Galaxy to do so much for student Yoshiko. A youngster holding a small fan walked out from the side. On the red side were the students from Class S2. He was wearing a kendo robe with his name hanging on his chest, Big Wild Ball Maple. Wang Ling had just taken a glance out of the corner of his eye. On the other side, Wang Ming sent Wang Ling detailed information on the person in front of him. In fact, in this situation where the red team was the winner by default, Wang Ming's side had actually already calculated based on the winning percentages that apart from Wang Ling and Lotus Sun, the remaining 5 people could squeeze into the delegation. The wild maple in front of him was one of them. The young man looked like he was watching a show. His fair face was still childish, and there was a birthmark in the shape of a maple leaf between his eyebrows. It was said that this was the origin of the name of the wild group Maple. The 9 Paths and high school kendo team were famous around the world. They were the main force that exported talents to the national team, and the wild maple was the next leader of the 9 Paths and high school kendo team. In terms of strength in all aspects, Wild Maple was indeed the cream of the crop of the younger generation. He was also a genius-level figure. But compared with Wang Ling, he was still lacking by more than 100 million points. I don't know what student Yoshiko is hesitating about. Student Matsushita Galaxy is such a good girl. Marry her. At that moment, the youngster smiled lightly on the side. He looked at the blue team in front of him, which had already entered the white-hot stage of the Civil War, and his heart was at ease. Who would have thought that the final qualifier would go on so effortlessly? Lotus Sun frowned and said helplessly, "But I don't like girls." "Don't. If student Matsushita Galaxy hears this, she will be very sad." At that moment, Wild Maple stared ahead as if he had sensed something. On the blue team, the remaining 6 people who were locked in a fierce battle with Matsushita Galaxy turned deathly pale because of Matsushita Galaxy's surging aura. They were extremely shocked. They had thought that 9 Tails mode was already Matsushita Galaxy's limit, and had never expected his aura to actually rise again. 10 Tails, huh? The people on the blue team were stunned. They actually had no idea why Matsushita Galaxy would be willing to go to this extent. In order to be selected as the representative team this time, Matsushita Galaxy had specially cultivated this ultimate move, and had planned to use it in the competition against the other schools. Even she herself had never thought that she would be able to use it in this kind of situation. But for classmate Kamiya Ryoko, it was all worth it. When Matsushita Shingi revealed his hidden trump card, the crowd was stunned. Wang Ling and Lotus Sun had the same premonition in their hearts. The blue team's defeat was certain. With this kind of aura, Matsushita Galaxy would have no problem beating up the other blue team members. But this way, Matsushita Galaxy would also be injured. Why on earth did he have to do this? Lotus Sun felt that she couldn't wait until they left the island to lay her cards on the table. Matsushita Galaxy was too crazy. She felt that it was better for her to explain the situation earlier. At that moment, Wang Ling stared thoughtfully at the anxious girl next to him. To be honest, Wang Ling hadn't expected things to develop to this point. The main thing was that he himself hadn't expected Matsushita Galaxy, who was in love, to suffer such a severe blow to her intelligence. But when all was said and done, this was all because of him. It was better for him to solve it. The main thing was that this was the first time Wang Ling had seen this girl, who had always been extremely quick-witted, actually show such a helpless expression next to him. For a moment, he felt a little apologetic. When Matsushita Galaxy and the other 6 people on the blue team perished together, Wang Ling secretly crooked his finger, and an invisible spirit light shot out at a speed invisible to the naked eye. After all this was done, Wang Ling's heart, which had been hanging in the air, felt a lot more at ease. This competition is too boring. Wild Team Maple put away his small fan and stared at the people on the red team with a smile. I think we shouldn't do anything. It's better to preserve our strength and win glory for our school. Now that the blue team has been eliminated, we've been watching from the sidelines and haven't made a move yet, so we have 0 points. Wild Team Maple said, also, it doesn't seem appropriate to make a move in this situation, because the 8 of us are a team to begin with. Whoever makes a move on a teammate will have their points deducted, and won't be qualified to go. After saying this, Wild Team Maple gave Wang Ling a meaningful look. To be honest, he didn't really want Wang Ling to go. This was a competition between their 9 paths and a high school. Why would they let an exchange student from another school interfere? What do you want to do? Peacock asked on the side. That's simple. We'll take turns throwing the dice. The person with the most points will go. At that moment, Wild Team Maple gave a meaningful smile. As he spoke, he took out a simple table, 3 dice, and a dice cup from his storage bag. As a player who frequented bars, this was practically a common item for Wild Team Maple. This depends too much on luck. I don't know how to do it. A boy called Hattori Kwanja frowned. It's fine. If you don't know, I can help you. As long as you trust me. Wild Team Maple said, in any case, it's all about luck. Do you want to gamble? Then let's do it, Hattori Kwanja said dubiously. In any case, it was all about luck. Okay. Wild Team Maple smiled. He skillfully placed the dice into the dice clock, and the crisp sound of the dice colliding rang out. The results were out. 5, 6, 6. Hattori Kwanja's eyes lit up. The others on the side also had incredulous expressions on their faces. The highest of the 3 dice was 18 points. Wild Team Maple's Hattori Kwanja had thrown 17 points in one go, which was already an extremely high number. Since you trust me, of course I won't let you down. Wild Team Maple smiled. Is there anyone else? Do you want me to do it? Saying this, he started to shake the dice again and looked at Lotus Sunday. This time, I'll be helping classmate Chimiya. If the number is low, it's mine, and if it's high, it's classmate Chimiya's. Lotus Sun didn't even have time to refuse when the dice cup was already settled. Wild Team Maple quickly uncovered it. The number in front of him was shockingly an 18-point leopard. If the first time he threw a high number was luck, then the second time, it was skill. Wild Team Maple knew how to control. Brother Day, you're amazing. Can you help me throw it? Ah, me too. The rest of the people followed suit. Of the 8 people, only Wang Ling and Wild Team Maple hadn't thrown their dice yet. Current record of points. The order from highest to lowest was Lotus Sun, 18 points Peacock, 17 points Hattori Kwanja, 17 points Minor Actor 1, 16 points Minor Actor 2, 16 points Minor Actor 3, 16 points. After sorting out everyone's current points, Wild Team Maple also shook out his own. Without a doubt, it was another 18-point leopard. Looking at this scene, Wang Ling already knew what was going on. Wild Team Maple was making things difficult for him and trying to push him out. Lang San, do you want to do it yourself, or do you want me to help you? Wild Team Maple looked at Wang Ling and smiled. At that moment, Wang Ling sighed deeply in his heart. He hadn't been the god of gamblers for a long time. Why did he have to force him to do it? It was only 18 points. If he did it, the highest he could get was 63 points. Chapter 1544. Even for Wang Ling, getting 63 points was a matter of probability, because he often shook the die too hard and directly turned it into powder. This required a high degree of precision. But now, with so many seals on him, the success rate of this kind of precision operation had greatly increased. For An Wan's present, he needed the prize money from this competition. Moreover, under the current circumstances, the best result would be to get more than 18 points. After all, the remaining 3 minor characters didn't even have names. Obviously, the author of the book didn't intend to include them in the story. Lang Sang looks very nervous. Do you really not need me to do it for you? Maybe if I get 17 points, you can become a member of the delegation. Wild Maple smiled sinisterly. How could Wang Ling not know that there was a knife hidden behind a smile? But he actually didn't take Big Wild Group Maple's malice to heart. He didn't need to argue with a child. Even though he was only a child, actually, he had already analyzed it before. Due to the strict hierarchy within the 9 paths and the high school, it created an internal chain of contempt. This actually greatly deepened the xenophobia within the 9 paths and the high school. For Maple, a native of Sun Island, the wild group, Sun Island, Wang Ling was actually just a despicable foreigner. In addition, because of the Sun Island High School ranking list, Wang Ling had been in the limelight and had a certain amount of influence among the girls. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they hated Wang Ling to the bone. How could a foreign student steal their limelight? His looks were average, his studies were average, and his height was average. Wasn't it just that his face was a little pale and he was a little luckier? Why was it that girls liked him so much? Be it the wild group Maple or Peacock who was watching from the sidelines, none of them could figure this out. In fact, regarding the issue of height, Wang Ling had something to say. He didn't really care about his height, because his body could adjust the proportions of every inch of his body. Moreover, for a man, being tall while lying down might be more important than being tall while standing, no need. At that moment, he shook his head. With one hand in his trouser pocket, he took the initiative to stretch out the other hand to touch the dice cup, refusing the good intentions of the wild group maple. The wild group maple knew about it. Wang Ling had taken the bait. Actually, he had guessed that Wang Ling would definitely do it himself. Therefore, the dice cup and the dice had been specially tampered with. These two items were specially made from a special material, and their durability was extremely low. When the dice cup shook, the dice inside the cup kept colliding back and forth. This seemingly normal collision would greatly reduce the die's durability. After a certain number of times, the die would completely shatter. This was the reason why the wild group maple was kind enough to help everyone throw the dice. The first 7 people, including himself, had all been shaken by him. How many times had the dice collided in the dice cup? Big Wild Maple had calculated it clearly. This was one of the special skills of the wild group maple. Years of shaking the dice cup had nurtured an excellent hand feel. In addition, he often watched ghostly videos to train his hearing. In a ghostly video played at 32 times the speed, he could clearly hear with his own ears how many times the dice had been stuck, and how many times the clips and audio had been repeated. In fact, in the first 7 rounds of throwing the dice, the wild group maple had already used his own precise calculations to push the dice's durability to the limit. Now, forget shaking the dice cup. Even the slightest vibration would turn these dice into powder in an instant. Lang San, what are you going to do next? At that moment, the wild group maple crossed his arms and looked like he was watching a good show. The reason why he had chosen to shake the dice cup was actually because Wang Ling had the title of number 60 high school's mascot. Even if he was a mascot, so what? If you were really lucky enough, why don't you roll some dice? The wild group maple sneered. He could already see the outcome of this gamble. Because the moment Wang Ling opened the dice cup, what awaited everyone definitely wouldn't be dice, but a pile of dice that had turned into snow-white powder. In the central control room, Leek Sasaki looked at the remote image taken by the referee and felt nervous in his heart. Lang San, is he going to be alright? He sighed. He shouldn't have competed with Ono. His family runs a casino. On Sun Island, a casino could be operated legally with a formal business license after being approved by the department. But generally speaking, the conditions for this kind of approval were very strict. If a family could run a casino, they had to have some sort of background. The wild group maple had grown up in that kind of environment, and he often performed in all kinds of bars. Apart from kendo, the tricks he was most familiar with cards and dice were his most familiar. So that's how it is. A special die made of black dust? On the other side, Wang Ming, who was watching, had already used the electronic eye he always carried with him to scan the dice using a long-range satellite. Although black dust was fragile, it was a high-end decompression and shockproof material. Wang Ming was actually no stranger to it. And now, the wild group maple was using black dust to make gambling tools. In fact, Wang Ming himself wasn't surprised. Because this was one of Wang Ming's tricks to begin with, because he had often played this trick with Jai Yin in the lab. They competed in points. As long as Jai Yin had more points than him, he would eat. In the end, because Wang Ming had tampered with the dice, Jai Yin hadn't won even once. Brother Air, what should we do? Should we think of a way to help Lang San? Leek Sasaki was extremely nervous as he watched the scene in the video. No need, he definitely has a way. Wang Ming smiled. He felt that Leek Sasaki was even more nervous than Wang Ling. At that moment, under everyone's gazes, Wang Ling had already started to carefully shake the dice on the table. With this shake, a lot of people knew that something wasn't right. Because when the dice cup had been shaking, the crisp sound of the dice hitting each other hadn't come out at all. Wang Ling had just shaken it a little. After a muffled sound, no matter how much he shook it, there was only dead silence in the dice cup, and not a single sound could be heard. Ha ha ha. The wild group maple laughed. Lang San is too careless. Why did you use so much force? Did you shake the dice into powder? This is there something wrong with the dice? Hattori Chuanja asked weakly. I was the one who threw the first 7 times, how could there be something wrong with the dice? If there's a problem, I have new dice. Let's not count and do it again. But this time, I'm not going to care about you. The wild group Maple had guessed that someone would question him, so he straightaway used the excuse he had prepared beforehand. Sure enough, after he said this, Hattori Chuanja shrunk his neck and didn't dare say anything else. At that moment, Wang Ling sighed helplessly. He opened the dice cup in front of everyone, indeed. The dice inside had already turned into white powder. But the wild group Maple couldn't laugh at the scene in front of him at all. Because the dice had indeed turned into powder, but the points had been preserved. He didn't know how Wang Ling had been able to pick out each and every one of the dots on the dice with such precision, but the scene in front of him now was exactly this incredible scene. On the snow-white dice powder was a row of exquisite little dots, like a long ellipsis, arranged from left to right, and the number of dots added up. There were 126 of them. Not only had Wang Ling picked out every single dot. Chapter 1545. Zifeng Association's Student Branch Conference Room. The wild Maple rubbed the space between his eyebrows and leaned back on the sofa with a pained expression. He was one of the members of the Rainbow Seven Suns gang of 9 Paths and high school's Purple Maple Society. He was also the vice president. In the Purple Maple gang, all the gang members' names must contain the word maple or a homophone of maple. This unwritten rule was said to have been set by the first leader of the gang, and because it was unique, it had been passed down. You let him in just like that? The current president, Moriyama Keed, looked at him in disbelief and said, haven't you never failed before? When people walk by the river, how can they not wet their shoes? The wild group Maple also had a headache. He sighed. There was always a higher mountain. This time, Big Wild Tuan Keed had really experienced it. He thought that his skills in dice and poker were superb. Who would have thought that they would kick an iron plate this time? Even now, he still didn't understand how on earth Wang Ling had achieved such a godly technique. That was far more than an iron plate. The person he had encountered was simply an immortal. He cheated. How can it be cultivated? Wild Maple couldn't help but sigh. After confirming the final 5 members of the delegation, these 3 words were the words he repeated the most. But tell the truth. This time, he was thoroughly convinced by Wang Ling. Even if Wang Ling hadn't fought him head-on. But rolling dice was a godly skill. Maple admitted that he had never seen such a thing in his life. If it wasn't for the fact that he still had to consider his relationship with the gang, he would have wanted to acknowledge him as his master on the spot. One should know when to quit while one is ahead. This was something Maple's family had instilled in him since he was young. Although their family ran a casino, and the wild group Maple grew up watching all kinds of gambling games and learned many tricks and unique skills. He was also more interested in researching all kinds of cheats and techniques to detect cheats. But in fact, the wild group Maple had never gambled with anyone. It was mainly because of the pressure from his family. The father of the wild group Maple started his business in this field, but he didn't want his son to be involved in this kind of thing. That was why he forced the wild group Maple to cultivate sword Dao. Fortunately, the wild group Maple was quite talented in sword Dao. It was just that Big Wild Maple felt that his parents didn't really understand what he wanted. After thinking for a long time, Big Wild Maple's brows relaxed. I think it's better if we don't touch this person. Why did you suddenly think of this? Moriyama Keed laughed. Haven't you always wanted to run the family business, but uncle and auntie wouldn't allow it? You've been invincible all over the world. Now that you've finally met an expert, shouldn't you stimulate your willpower and completely crush him? Some people can't be defeated. Oh no, Tuan Feng said. He spoke very seriously, especially after he firmly believed that Wang Ling was an immortal, and this belief was even more unwavering. That Helangsang from number 60 high school in Huaxiu Nation was really strong. You're the same as my parents. You don't know what I want. Big Wild Ball Keed sighed and looked at Moriyama Keed. In fact, the Wild Group Maple didn't mean to directly inherit the casino when he mentioned running the family business. Instead, he wanted to rely on the abilities he had learned so far to change the industry. He wanted to turn his own company into a gambling rehabilitation center, or something like that. This was what Big Wild Maple had always wanted to do. Won't you think about it again? Moriyama Keed asked when he saw the determination in Big Wild Maple's eyes. I won't get involved in this anymore. Big Wild Maple stood up and said seriously. Fine. Moriyama Keed shook his head and smiled bitterly. When we heard the news that Hulangsang wins the world, we wanted to rope this Hulangsang in, but unfortunately, he didn't appreciate it at all. That's why we, the Rainbow Seven Sons gang, decided to join forces to embarrass him. Even if you don't want to help, there will be others who will. I advise you to be careful, Big Wild Maple said. Oh no, Tuan Keed said, those people in the student union may already be Hulangsang's fans. Also, that Miss Lotus Sun who came with Hulangsang has been taking good care of him. So what? Moriyama Keed smiled. I've looked up information on this Hulangsang. He was born in an ordinary well-to-do family. A sparrow is destined to be a sparrow. He won't amount to anything. Big Wild Maple was silent for a moment before he replied coldly, then do as you wish. Then, he turned and left quickly. After leaving the conference room, a bleak cold wind blew on Big Wild Maple's cheeks. Time, Friday, December 18th, 3:15 in the morning. It was a little far to go home now, and Big Wild Maple was upset. He didn't want to go back, so he took a small path in the direction of the student apartments in Area S. It was as if someone had predicted that he would show up here. He had only taken a few steps when he was blocked by a familiar figure. Student Big Wild Maple, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Leek Sasaki's eyes were filled with pleasant surprise when he saw Big Wild Maple. He hadn't expected Wang Ming's prediction to be completely accurate. He had actually been able to intercept Big Wild Maple on this small path. Brother Fool's prediction was too accurate. Amazing. President? Why are you? Big Wild Maple clearly hadn't expected Leek Sasaki to be waiting here at this time. It was as if he had predicted that he would come. Don't ask me where I'm from. Leek Sasaki looked at him, his golden hair glistening in the moonlight as if it had been coated with a layer of wax. I know, that guy Moriyama Keed came looking for you, right? Are the Rainbow Seven Sons gang also planning to deal with Hulangsang? Big Wild Maple didn't respond, which could be considered a tacit admission. Also, it seems to me that you don't intend to continue participating, right? Leek Sasaki looked at Big Wild Maple and smiled. That's a very smart choice. Whether I participate or not doesn't seem to have anything to do with the president, Big Wild Maple replied coldly. He was just about to leave. Leek Sasaki continued, they don't understand you, but I do. You're learning all these skills now to change the way your family operates, right? These words made Big Wild Maple's figure freeze on the spot. He turned around in disbelief and looked at Leek Sasaki. One had to know that even his parents didn't understand this matter. I know, student Big Wild. And I also know how to help you, Leek Sasaki said. Of course he knew. Because of everything that Big Wild Maple was saying now. Wang Ming had calculated everything remotely through his brain deduction technique. All Leek Sasaki needed to do was make good use of his identity as the president of the student union. Actually, you really want to ask Hulangsang for advice, right? But you're too embarrassed to ask. It was clear that Leek Sasaki's words had struck Big Wild Maple's heart. If you want to ask Hulangsang for advice, there's actually a very convenient way, Leek Sasaki said at that moment. What way? Big Wild Maple was clearly interested. Join the cult. Join the cult? Yes. Join the cult. Have you heard of a cult in Huaxiao that exchanges literature? Grey Cult. It's actually Hulangsang's fan club. Leek Sasaki smiled as he looked at the youngster in front of him. So, student Big Wild, do you want to join the cult? Chapter 1546. This was the first time Wild Group Maple had heard of Wang Ling's essay, and also the first time he knew that there was a fan club on Earth whose core members were literature lovers. To Wild Group Maple, joining a fan club was a little demonic. After all, wasn't a fan club something that only idols and celebrities could have? He thought of a certain female idol in the otaku circle holding a concert. Those fanatical otaku fans would have headbands tied around their heads, and they would wear sweatshirts and baggy pants with their idol's name printed on them as they waved their glow sticks in unison to the rhythm of their idol's singing. As they waved their glow sticks, they would hum haha as they cheered. Was he going to wave his glow stick for Ho Lang Sang too? Wild Group Maple couldn't help shivering all over at this thought. From a normal man's point of view, he really couldn't imagine it. And since it was a literary fan club, singing or something was unlikely. Could it be that they were going to recite poems and wave their glow sticks at the same time? I think classmate Ono might be thinking too much. Actually, the Gray Sect is more normal than any fan club, it's just an ordinary exchange of literature. It was as if Leek Sasaki knew what Wild Group Maple was thinking, and he wiped his sweat. Also, I checked classmate Ono's cultural results, and you're ranked among the best in our high school. The truth was that even Class S students weren't proficient in all subjects in 9 paths and high school. As long as they were proficient in 1 or 2 subjects, they could still enter the S-level sequence with super high learning points and reward points. Wild Group Maple's results in Kendo class were excellent. He was also among the best in Chinese class. Generally speaking, there were 2 main factors for mastering a subject to the pinnacle. One was talent, and the other was interest. Of course, hard work was also important. But there were some things that couldn't be done with just a little effort, for example, Big Pigeon Kuchuan. He had never thought that working hard to write 20,000 words would result in 10 chapters in one every day. Unfortunately, he couldn't do it. As long as I join the Gray Sect, I can get closer to Ho Lang Sang. Wild Group Maple's eyes were still a little suspicious. Leek Sasaki gave his earnest and well-meaning advice. I'm now the head of Sun Island's 9 paths and the Gray Sect branch. As long as classmate Maple performs well before Ho Lang Sang and the others leave the island, I can give you the position of deputy head. And deputy head will actually have a chance to communicate with Ho Lang Sang. Although it's an online question. But at that time, if Big Wild Tuan Fong wants to ask something, are you still afraid that Ho Lang Sang won't tell you? This sounded very tempting, but in reality, it was half a lie and half a coax. Wang Ling didn't have the time to answer these fans. The so-called opportunity to communicate. Actually, the person they were really talking to wasn't Wang Ling. It was Lotus Sunday. Anyway, who would know who you were chatting with through the screen? It was a way to help the fan club grow. Of course, Lotus Sun was also preparing for the things Maple wanted to learn and understand. Wasn't it just gambling skills, he just needed to learn it. As for now, after learning that he could indeed deepen his connection with Wang Ling after joining the sect, Wild Maple was indeed moved. What do I need to do after joining the sect? Of course, it's to expand our 9 paths and the Gray Sect's branches and rope in more Ho Lang Sang's fans. Of course, there was still a literature assessment. I can check the results of the cultural classes using the student union system. I won't consider those below grade A for now. I see. Ono Tuan Ki nodded. Then, he looked at the leak and said seriously, fine. I've decided. I'll join the sect. Smart choice. Leek Keed nodded and smiled. After agreeing to join the sect, there was no news of Big Maple returning to the dormitory. Because joining the Gray Sect meant that he had something new to look forward to, the gloominess he had felt in the Z Phone Club branch conference room instantly disappeared. Leek Keed brought Big Maple to the student union office. He saw that Sparrow was seriously compiling the relevant data on the computer. For some reason, Big Maple felt that Deputy President Sparrow of the student union seemed a little different from before. He felt that classmate Six-Eyed Akagami seemed a lot more approachable. To be honest, the Wild Group Maple had a deep impression of Sparrow. The main thing was that every time he saw Deputy President Sparrow, he couldn't help feeling a cold wind blow past him. It was as if some kind of ghost was staring at him, but now, this feeling had completely disappeared. This was all thanks to Lotus Sun's rescue in the haunted house. Sparrow, help Big Maple register. He has already agreed to join the sect. As soon as he entered the office, Leek keyed carefully and quickly closed the door, then reported the situation to Sparrow. Okay. Sparrow quickly typed on the keyboard. Big Maple then realized that there were actually quite a few new members on the screen in front of him. He also saw quite a few familiar names among them. Hikari Ananoko? Big Maple was blank. I remember that she's a very autistic girl. It seems that everyone who knows her at school says she's very strange. Classmate Hikari Ananoko has a little emotional problem, Leek Keed said. It said that she was enlightened by Ho Lang-san in a dream. Big Maple. Why did it sound more and more strange to him? We judged that she was qualified to join the sect based on her previous cultural results. We didn't expect her to agree as soon as we asked. Leek Keed scratched his head and smiled. Actually, there were a lot of people like Hikari Ananoko, who had cultural results, and who had directly agreed to join the student union when they asked in private. There was no exception. All of them were people he had helped before, victims who had been forcibly turned into ghosts by Nine Palace Star Light and the Hair Devil Spirit. Most of them couldn't remember what had happened. What the youngster who had spoken to them in the dream looked like, and what he had said, they had already forgotten everything. All that was left in their minds was a vague outline, a warmth that seemed like it would never fade, and the name, Ho Lang. They also couldn't remember what Ho Lang meant. It was just that this word had a sense of familiarity to it. This was also one of the reasons why Wang Ling's pseudonym, Wang Lang, had received support from so many Nine Paths and high school students after it flooded the high school sword ranking list. Many of these students were from Class S and below. The ratio was higher in Class C and B, and there were also a few from Class A. Now, Nine Paths and the Gray Sect branch had been officially established under the leadership of Leek Keed, Wang Ming and Sparrow. Sparrow had just programmed an invitation program to automatically filter out suitable targets and send them out. He hadn't expected to receive so many responses. Big Maple looked at the numbers on the side of the Excel list. Including him, there were actually 56 people who had agreed to join the sect. This was a higher number of members than some of the Rainbow Seven Sons gang. And the most important thing was, Leek Keed said that this was the first day that the Nine Paths and the Gray Sect branch had been established. So many people had agreed to apply on the first day, then wouldn't the entire Nine Paths be taken over by the Gray Sect in the future? Was this the great man's strategy of surrounding the city from the countryside? Of course, what was most inconceivable to Big Maple was, this Gray Sect fan club was Ho Lang Sang's fan club. And the branch head was the current president of the Nine Paths and the student union. Sun Island's Nine Paths and the local power to support a student who had come all the way from abroad and would only be staying for a few days. This sounded outrageous. But even so, the moment Big Maple saw the list, a sense of pride welled up in his heart. This kind of pride couldn't be felt in any of the Rainbow Seven Sons gangs. As expected of Ho Lang Sang. A true immortal. It had only been a few days. He could actually use his charisma to gain so many people's attention and support. As expected of the man he fancied. The registration has been completed, Big Maple. At that moment, Sparrow's words broke his train of thought. So fast. It's just copying and pasting personal information, it's no trouble, Sparrow said. Also, do you see the booklet on my desk? This is a printed version of the Gray Sex program. Please recite it carefully. Otherwise, it won't be good if you're identified as a mole. There's a program? Big Maple was blank. He opened the booklet with a gray cover. The so-called Gray Sect program wasn't a program in the true sense of the word. It was actually the essay called Substitute, which Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch had written for Wang Ling at the Nine Dragons Mountain Conclave back then. The famous line, "A speck of ash in the Times," had come from there. But just reciting this line clearly wouldn't make one a true fan. Thus, Lotus Sun had already set down the most basic conditions for joining the sect. That was, recite the full text. Furthermore, each branch head would do a spot check every month, and those who couldn't recite it would be directly kicked out. We already have so many people on the first day. Can I still be a vice president? Big Maple looked at the list and was a little suspicious. It wasn't difficult for him to recite something. It was just that he was worried about whether Leek Sasaki's promise could be fulfilled. A branch can have up to 2 vice presidents. Student Big Maple is a student from Area S, and apart from me and Sparrow, you're the 3rd student from Area S to join the Gray Sect. Leek Sasaki said, since I promised Student Ono to be a vice president, of course I won't go back on my word. But Student Ono also has to cooperate and do some work. Otherwise, I'm afraid it'll be hard to convince the masses. I understand. Big Maple said, then, what do you need me to do? Help us rope in more students from Area S, Leek Sasaki said. Student Sparrow and I are members of the student council, so we're a special case. It's hard to talk to Area S. Those people are indeed stubborn. When I came out of the Purple Maple Society earlier, the Rainbow Seven Sons were planning to come up with a plan to embarrass Ho Langsang. What kind of plan exactly? I've already made it clear that I won't get involved, so they've already excluded me. Sigh. What a pity. Otherwise, you can be a spy. Do you know that Jin Wine in Detective Conan? It seems he's surrounded by spies. Or rather, we don't have any other way. Do we have spies in each of the Rainbow Seven Sons? I have a few brothers who are on good terms with me. I can ask them. Big Maple frowned. But I don't know if they agree or not. Let's try our best. Okay. It was important to rope in the students from Area S. On the other hand, as a young man in the new cultivation era, the Upper Nine Paths and the Gray Church branch had a computer expert like Sparrow. As the president, Leek Sasaki had a lot of room to command. The next step was to expand the scale of the sect and increase the popularity of the Gray Sect on Sun Island. Therefore, he asked Sparrow to register an account on Bilibili, Upper Nine Paths and Gray Church branch. He planned to post some interesting videos to increase the popularity of the Gray Church on the internet. At this moment, Leek Sasaki suddenly said, I forgot to mention, Student Ono. Congratulations on joining the Gray Church. He reached out and shook Big Maple's hand tightly. I'll do my best. Minister. Big Maple nodded. His expression was extremely serious. In the dormitory, Wang Ling sat cross-legged on the floor, naked from the waist up. Although he had tried his best to preserve his strength in today's battle, he had in fact used up a lot of the one-time talismans. He couldn't make more talismans in a short time. He could only use his own skills to patch up the one-time talismans that had already collapsed but weren't completely broken. It was impossible to completely patch them up. Some of the one-time talismans had collapsed too thoroughly, and there was already no way to salvage them. Even if the others were salvaged, they wouldn't be as effective as before. Take durability, for example. When a brand new one-time talisman came out of the oven, its durability was 100. Now that it had collapsed, Wang Ming could probably only save 1 to 5 durability points. No matter how small a mosquito's leg was, it was still meat. In the current situation, it was better than nothing. And now, these were the ones that had been salvaged. Wang Ling had originally had more than 90 talismans, but after today's selection, he only had 81 left. Not counting the ones that had been salvaged, there were less than 70 left. At that moment, Wang Ming gently patted Wang Ling on the back. Like a plaster, he pressed the salvaged one-time talismans back on Wang Ling one by one. But he didn't dare to use too much force. He was mainly afraid that if he slapped Wang Ling, he would break a bone. Kid, why is your skin even fairer than Dan? Wang Ming said with a smile as he helped Wang Ling put the talismans back on. Wang Ling was silent. He manually adjusted his skin color a little darker. Wang Ming looked at his rapidly darkening skin, and the corners of his mouth twitched. It's fine as long as it's normal, you don't have to be as dark as an unlucky guy, After being mischievous for a while, Wang Ling quickly adjusted his skin color back. It was rare for the two brothers to talk in the quiet of the night. I haven't reached the research stage for that black stone yet. It will take some time to analyze the box outside, but it shouldn't be too difficult. Wang Ming said. Unfortunately, Dan doesn't understand these things. I think it's best to have an assistant. Actually, at this point, in Wang Ling's mind, a vague image of a person emerged. This person wasn't anyone else. It was that civilian scientist whom Ryoko Kinomiya and Lotus Sun had recruited previously, Shochong. Chapter 1547. Recruiting an assistant was in fact a very important matter. Wang Ming actually had a lot of candidates in mind before. But he never had the courage to recruit them as his assistants. That was because the Dao Talisman Seal research was a top-secret project that Wang Ming had developed in private. If he found an unreliable person and the matter leaked out, everything would be over. Admittedly, whether it was Wang Ling's fearsome spells or Wang Ming's powerful brain waves, both had the ability to erase a person's memory. Or to set up some trap to seal the secret forever. Once the secret slipped out, that person would die or something like that. However, the two brothers were not cruel and merciless people. Research projects in the first place required sincere cooperation. Without mutual trust, they wouldn't be able to achieve their final goal. Wang Ming had actually been conflicted about choosing an assistant for several years. Ever since he had entered junior high school, he had in fact already had an idea. Unfortunately, he had never put it into practice. At that moment, it wasn't as if Wang Ming hadn't paid attention to this internet celebrity folk scientist that Wang Ling had mentioned. There was a certain amount of controversy in the cultivation scientific community as to whether Shochong had genuine talent or not. By recording videos of him creating all kinds of strange little inventions, he had attracted a lot of attention online. Things like an essential oil face wiper, an automatic hair shampoo, an automatic ice cream liquor. The technical content of these little inventions was very average, and they were mainly for fun. It was just that no one expected Shochong to rely on these gadgets to explode online, and then pull in a large number of Wang Duiyu investments. To put it bluntly, whether or not Shochong had this ability couldn't be determined based on the rumors and slanders in the outside world. After all, in every circle, there were some people who thought they were infallible but didn't see the light of day. Seeing other people in the same circle explode in popularity, it was inevitable that they would be the ones to be sour. A lot of the time, when online rumors about certain people, especially things that didn't have any evidence, just take a look and laugh. Without knowing the full picture, one wouldn't comment, only a fool would believe everything. Of course, the biggest controversy about Shochong wasn't that he had relied on these little inventions to pull in investments. It was that a lot of the products he had customized actually had design flaws, and there was a lot of debate online about safety incidents. For example, Lotus Sun's cousin Fan Xing, he had been launched out of the building by Shochong's safety escape device, and he hadn't even landed. Fan Xing was still lying in the hospital like a mummy. His entire life was probably ruined. The most important thing was that he couldn't die no matter what. Every day, he was hanging on by a thread, and he was in so much pain. High paraplegia prevented him from getting out of bed, and he couldn't even jump off a building. Fan Xing very much wanted his little brother to end his life. Unfortunately, after he fell, he became a zombie and lost the ability to speak. He lay on the bed and cried every day, unable to speak. Brother, to say to him with his eyes. Unfortunately, the lackey wiped away his tears and held his hand tightly. Brother Xing. Brother, modern cultivation medical technology was so advanced. You will always be able to cure it. Fan Xing was in despair. Treat my ass. I just want to have a good time. Fu Wang Wang Ming Ling I. Fan. Dao of Feng. 2 of Ming Dao. Wang, fan of Ming heaven, he Wang. Wang. Wang Ling. Good. Wang, to be, he fact, Wang Ming. To be honest, he actually didn't know whether he was reliable or not. He just pinched his fingers together and deduced that Wang Ming's subsequent research would be related to Shouchong. This person is very controversial in our circle, and even if I invite him, he might not listen to me. My identity is strictly confidential. In the eyes of outsiders, I'm nothing more than a hothead. Wang Ming smiled. On the other hand, Wang Ming had always had a hunch that Shouchong, he felt that there were a lot of times when this old fox was playing the fool. Whether it was those strange little inventions posted online or the subsequent safety incidents. It was most likely the result of his mastermind. Take those safety incidents for example, all the victims had behaved badly to a certain extent. In some sense, he was enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. But the police couldn't do anything about Shouchong. That was because when they had signed the contract, Shouchong had actually stipulated that any safety problems that occurred after the boss had confirmed the product's acceptance had nothing to do with him. It was clearly written on black and white paper. What else could they do? They could only treat it as an accident and leave it to the insurance company to handle. It's really hard. In the girls' dormitory in Zone S, Lotus Sun and Jai Yin were studying the 126-point dice clock method that Wang Ling had just performed. After all, she would have to communicate with other people in Wang Ling's place later. To deal with the problem of the wild group maple, they had to study the dice clock method. In the end, it was more difficult than Lotus Sun had imagined. Wow, how on earth did classmate Wang Ling do it? He took out the points and divided them into two halves. Lotus Sun was astonished. This required too much precision, and it was only now that Wang Ling was heavily sealed that he could do it. Normally, it would be impossible. If you're so curious, why don't you just ask your Wang Ling directly? Jai Yin couldn't help teasing. Sister Factor, you're joking with me again. Lotus Sun blushed. Actually, these were all trivial matters to her, and she could do her own research. She cherished every opportunity to talk to Wang Ling. Even if it was just through text messages or other communication software. She would never disturb him for no reason unless it was a particularly urgent matter. Classmate Wang Ling likes peace and quiet. If I send him frequent messages, he'll hate me. Lotus Sun smiled. Then, she stared at the dice clock in front of her, lost in thought. Looking at the girl's thoughtful expression, Jai Yin couldn't help sighing silently in her heart. This girl was so sensible that it made one's heart ache. She just didn't know how much longer she would have to endure it. It was said that it was a difficult process for a daughter-in-law to become a mother-in-law, but for some reason, after seeing Lotus Sun and Wang Ling, Jai Yin suddenly felt that this bit of suffering didn't seem like much. Wang Ling had used the spirit energy at his fingertips for the 126-point dice clock method. Lotus Sun felt that it would be difficult for her to emulate him on this point. But if it was combined with Sword Dao, it might work. She stared at the dice clock in her hand for a while, and felt that she had a way to crack it. Although it was a different approach, in the end, it was still a way out. And the point was that the wild group maple was also an expert in Sword Dao, so her method might be a little easier for him to accept. Lotus Sun had also carefully considered developing the wild group maple into a deputy minister of the Nine Paths and the Grey Sect branch. Her sudden act of pretending to be Q Ryoko and participating in the competition had probably alarmed a lot of people in the Q family. Although there hadn't been any particular activity yet, Lotus Sun had a feeling that it wouldn't be long before the storm arrived. In this situation, the most important thing was to establish her identity. As the head of the Grey Sect, the Nine Paths and all the Grey Sect disciples could in fact provide a good cover for her plan to pretend to be Q Ryoko. The reason why Lotus Sun thought so highly of Wild Group Maple was mainly because of his overall battle strength. Compared with Leek Sasaki, Wild Group Maple, who was proficient in Sword Dao, was actually stronger than Lotus Sunday. In addition, it was just as Leek Sasaki had said. Wild Group Maple and the Rainbow Seven Suns gang would have an easier time doing things as a candidate for president of the Purple Maple Society branch. Then, a mature management system would be established in the 9 Paths and the Grey Sect branch. Leek Sasaki would be in charge of command and communication, Sparrow would be in charge of the internet layout and statistics, and Wild Group Maple would be in charge of protection and instigation of traitors. It wasn't completely without reason that Lotus Sun thought so highly of Wild Group Maple. The most important thing was that Wild Group Maple had passed Mysterious C's Sword Chi recognition. Even at the final stage of today's 5-person trial. He had deliberately made things difficult for Wang Ling and had even set up a trap. But the truth was that he wasn't a bad person by nature. In fact, he was someone with a very high EQ. On the other side, Wild Group Maple's actual actions didn't disappoint her. Leek Sasaki and Sparrow's suggestion was for him to plant a mole in the Rainbow Seven Suns gang and split them from the inside. In order to complete this plan, after Wild Group Maple joined the Grey Sect, his next step was naturally to find a brother who was on good terms with him to join the sect. And the first person he thought of was Lon Lon Lu, who Wang Ling had fought with earlier. He was the president of the Blue Face Society. Given that the Rainbow Seven Suns gang was currently united, with Lon Lon Lu's identity as president, there was practically no information that couldn't be obtained. In the office of the Blue Face Society branch, Lon Lon Lu sat in his seat in a daze. He had driven everyone else out of the office. Because he didn't want anyone to see his dazed expression, and most importantly, the reason for his dazed expression wasn't because of Wang Ling. It was actually because of Ho Lang San. After his fight with Wang Ling, he had been reflecting on that fight all this time. He clearly remembered that he had been injured during the fight because of the backlash. But after he woke up from his coma, he hadn't felt the slightest bit of discomfort. Even if the referee had released a healing spray, he shouldn't have been injured at all. When Wild Group Maple opened the office door and saw Lon Lon Lu's appearance, he couldn't help smiling in his heart. Sure enough, everything was as he had expected. It seemed that everyone who had fought Ho Lang San before had been conquered by his personal charm. Brother Lu, you look very distressed. Wild Group Maple pushed open the door with a smile on his face. Lon Lon Lu thought it was that blind member again, and was about to scold him away, but when he saw who it was, he shut his mouth. Wild Group Maple liked to add the word brother to the surname of people he was familiar with or respected. It didn't matter if the other party was older or younger than him. He would call them that. It made them seem closer. When Lon Lon Lu saw Wild Group Maple come over, he didn't say anything, and didn't even ask. What are you doing here? Wild Group Maple didn't treat himself as an outsider, and directly sat down in the vice president's seat as he looked at him. I'm guessing that Brother Lu is thinking about Ho Lang San. With his thoughts exposed, Lon Lon Lu wanted to retort, but he opened his mouth and closed it again. Indeed, he was a straight man, and he kept thinking about a man in his mind. It was a little hard to talk about this kind of thing. What if someone misunderstood his sexual orientation? What else do you know? Lon Lon Lu didn't deny it, and just stared at Wild Group Maple. Brother Lu probably feels the same way. It's the feeling I have after fighting with Ho Lang Sang. I'm really looking forward to fighting with him again. Lon Lon Lu's pupils contracted, and he almost instantly perked up. He had been distressed for a long time, and no one knew what he was thinking. Who would have thought that in the end, it would be his good brother Wild Group Maple who would take the initiative to look for him? Hearing this, Lon Lon Lu couldn't help sighing with emotion. That's right, he's a magical man. He looks weak, but he seems to be very strong, and there's a sense of mystery. After saying that, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. Unfortunately, I might not have the chance to fight Ho Lang San again in the future. I don't think so. Wild Group Maple smiled and said, I have a way here that can help Brother Lu deepen the relationship between you and Ho Lang San. I know. You mean the Grey Sect? You actually know? After I came back, I actually looked into some things about Ho Lang San. Of course, it's not because I have malicious intentions, but because I respect him. Lon Lon Lu said, but I don't seem to be qualified to join the Grey Sect. My language scores are too bad. That doesn't matter. Wild Group Maple said, As long as Brother Lu is willing, I can help you apply for special approval first, and then give you tuition. As long as you meet the standards for the monthly test. Is that okay? Of course. Wild Group Maple nodded. He looked at Lan Lu, revealing the same expression as when Leek Sasaki asked him. So, Brother Lu, are you ready to join the sect? Lan Lu immediately stood up. He looked very excited. Always ready. Then, Brother Lu, welcome to the sect. Next, I want to ask you about the current situation in the gang. Roughly 10 minutes later, Lotus Sun received information from Leek Sasaki. Wild Group Maple had obtained this information after communicating with Lan Lu. The other leaders of the Rainbow Seven Suns were currently planning to organize an upper-class student gathering that only students from Area S could attend, and then invite Wang Ling over. Before she finished reading the invitation, Lotus Sun instantly laughed. Upper class? How upper class could it be? Showing off their family's wealth, or their custom-made spirit swords or magic treasures? Lotus Sun had seen too many scenes since she was a child. What hadn't she seen before? She suddenly sighed with emotion at the childishness of this group of people. She had thought that Nine Paths and the students from Area S would be plotting something big, but it turned out to be just this. In fact, Lotus Sun didn't even bother to look at this kind of Chinibi gathering. The banquet says that you have to bring a valuable magic treasure to make an appearance. It's really childish behavior. Jai Yin couldn't help laughing when she saw the invitation. Sure enough, Lotus Sun dropped her forehead into her hand. Competing in magic treasures, classmate Wang Ling could probably smash those people's magic treasures to smithereens if he transformed them with a pile of shit. Chapter 1548. Number 60 High's group was fretting over the upper-class banquet. On the other side, Monk Jin Deng was still conscientiously carrying out the task that Wang Ling had given him. After accepting the chaos armor, he followed Qi's footsteps. However, Qi's speed was just too fast. When the steel wings on his back spread out, he could freely travel through space. It was equivalent to having an earth-shrinking technique that had no cooldown time and did not require him to activate it. All he needed to do was open the steel wings. Apart from that, the Bai also had the advantage of not having to worry about the invasion of chaos. The flow of time in the primal chaos was very different from that on Earth. The monk had only been chasing for a short while, but a long time might have passed on Earth. On the way to return the chaos armor, Tyrant didn't see Bai's figure at all. He couldn't help but have a thought. If he chased after her without any restrictions, when they returned to Earth, would Ling Zhenren already have children? After restraining his dangerous thoughts, Tyrant was startled for a moment. Then, he increased his speed again. He pulled out his head and put it upside down on his back. Then, it was accompanied by a loud bang. The 6 rings on his head suddenly emitted endless blue flames, bringing Tyrant's body forward at a rapid speed. This was a head-mounted backpack accelerator, a small skill that Monk had researched in his spare time. It wasn't too powerful, but it was more practical. However, Tyrant had never shown it in front of outsiders because it was scary to use. Using the skull-type backpack accelerator and the distance reduction technique, that didn't stop moving an inch. The monk finally felt the aura of Bai getting closer to him. If that's the case, should be able to catch up very soon. At this moment, the head behind the monk's back revealed a calm smile. In front of him, carrying Peng Shiren was a hoe that was 1,000,000 light-years away. Suddenly, he felt a familiar aura approaching from behind. Is it that monk? Yu frowned, not knowing why the monk was chasing after him. Could it be that he wanted to take advantage of the fact that he had lost 2 chaos weapons and was seriously injured? Could it be that he wanted to kill him while he was down? If this had happened to someone else, they might have been on guard. But if it's Monk Jin Deng, I don't think he would do something so immoral. Let go of me. Peng Shiren was tightly restrained by Deng Long. He wanted to wait for Bayan to bring him some distance away before looking for an opportunity to escape. However, he had underestimated the power of an earth progenitor. He was only a Tao ancestor. But Hui was the Earth ancestor. There was still a gap between them of the human ancestor level. Therefore, even though Qi was injured, it was still more than enough to suppress him. If you don't listen to me, don't blame me for beating Er Shuahua. Meng glared at Peng Shiren angrily. In his youth, Peng Shiren had been taught many lessons by Tao ancestor Wang and Qi in the past. It was naturally Tao ancestor Wang who had taught him more lessons. Sometimes, Tao ancestor Wang just happened to be busy and could not make a move. As the spirit of the Dharma form with its own consciousness, Qi would fight on his behalf. Peng Shiren in the past. Every inch of his flesh. Don't let them off. Even now, as a victim, Peng Shiren could not help but shiver when he thought about it. He thought he could break free. But now that it was obvious that he could not escape, he could only feign civility for the time being. Brother Zheng, in that case, where exactly is my master? Peng Shiren asked in a low voice. This was something that Peng Shiren had always wanted to know. Because if Tao ancestor Wang existed, it would affect his next plan. Qi replied, I don't know. This seemed like an excuse, but in reality, Qi really did not know where Tao ancestor Wang had gone. He was an independent spirit of the Dharma form. Although he could move on his own and had the ability to think independently, moreover, he could continue to live even after his master disappeared. But there was one thing that would not change. That was, Qi could never go against Tao ancestor Wang's will. And this was also the reason why Qi wanted to snatch Peng Shiren back. Because whenever Peng Shiren encountered danger, an alarm that ordinary people could not hear would ring out in his head, making him extremely irritated. For a very long time, Peng Shiren did not speak. Even Qi did not know where his master Tao ancestor Wang was. This time, Peng Shiren was really a little unsure. Brother Zheng, where are you taking me? Peng Shiren asked again. My residence, Qi said, concise and to the point. The current Peng Shiren was too good at causing trouble. Qi felt that it was better for him to watch. Of course, the most important thing was that Peng Shiren was colluding with that person that Qi really disliked. Back then, Tao ancestor Wang had paid such a huge price to suppress that grave god. He did not expect that after countless years, in exchange for the scene of his only disciple breaking the seal. He did not know how deep the connection between Peng Shiren and that grave god was. But on the way, he heard Peng Shiren mention a very strange thing. That was that the grave god had actually written his deeds into a book, and the title was Records of the Grave God. Qi sighed. He decided to imprison Peng Shiren in his residence. After recovering a little from his injuries, he would go and get rid of that grave god once and for all, although the other party was very strong. As long as he had not merged with the other half of the soul in the heavenly tomb, his chances of winning were still very high. But now that he had lost 2 chaotic weapons, his chances of winning would drop a little from the original foundation. But overall, the situation of that battle would not change. But he did not know why. He always had a feeling of uneasiness in his heart. In the infinite galaxy, in front of an unknown 7-colored star plate, Qi held Peng Shiren and stopped in his tracks. He seemed to be waiting for something. Not long after, Golden Lamp Monk, who carried a head as a projectile, appeared. Qi, probably only a monk could think of such a strange move. Qi, you run too fast. Golden Lamp chased all the way here, but his face was not red, and he was not out of breath. Why did you chase me all the way? Qi's eyes were slightly vigilant. This is the monk at my door. Although I lost my chaotic energy and was injured, I still have a lot of magic treasures at home that can be used. This poor monk chased you all the way, of course, not to fight you. The monk smiled kindly, then took out the completely repaired chaos armor from his sleeve, and explained the purpose of his visit. I am here to return this item. Seeing the intact chaos armor, Qi was obviously stunned for a while. His armor had been crushed like tofu pudding earlier. Could it be repaired? Chapter 1549. The two chaos artifacts had been smashed to pieces, and in his opinion, there was no way they could be repaired. This was also one of the flaws of these chaos artifacts, because there was no material in the world that could replace this natural material derived from chaos. If a magic artifact was worn out, it could be soaked in chaos for maintenance and so on. But if there was a gap, chaos couldn't repair it. Not to mention the fact that it had been smashed to pieces. Even if there was only a small scratch on a magic artifact, it couldn't be repaired by soaking in chaos. Actually, Zheng had long been resentful about this. It was indeed a headache that this chaos artifact didn't have a screen-shattering risk. So when the chaos armor appeared in front of him in perfect condition, his expression was one of utter amazement. Since this chaos armor can be repaired, then my corpse wrapping picture, Zheng said suspiciously. Wang Ling's strength was astonishing, and he had to admit that he had underestimated that youngster. He had never expected him to be able to repair a chaos artifact. But the chaos armor and the corpse wrapping picture were essentially the same thing. Since the chaos armor could be repaired, then in theory his corpse wrapping picture should also be able to be repaired. The corpse wrapping picture has indeed been repaired. Monks didn't lie, and Monk knew Zheng's temper, so it was better to be honest. Where's the picture? Ling Zhenren said he wanted to study it for a few days. He'll return it to you when he's done. The corner of Zheng's mouth twitched. Can you give me a deadline? Deadline or whatever, you're treating me like an outsider. Monk Golden Lamp put the head on his back. The expression on his face was as benevolent as ever. To tell you the truth, since these two chaos artifacts were smashed to pieces in the previous battle, they don't have any special value to Ling Zhenren. He wouldn't deliberately delay returning them. Hearing this, Zheng took a deep breath. After the battle, the two chaos artifacts that had been beyond repair had been repaired. This could already be considered a pleasant surprise. Since that youngster had sent Monk to return the chaos armor to him, that meant that he really didn't covet these two treasures. The corpse wrapping picture had been around longer than the chaos armor, and was an ancient artifact. She pondered that perhaps Wang Ling was interested in matters of the ages. He wanted to use the corpse wrapping picture to ask those ancient experts who had been suppressed in the picture. The idea seemed crazy at the time. That was because these ancient experts had been sealed in the diagram for a long time. Their souls were trapped inside, unable to escape. They had long since gone insane. You can never expect a psychopath to confess anything to you, therefore, regarding the Golden Lamp monk's words, Meng didn't mind it too much. Fine, if he wants to keep it, then let's keep it. After looking at it for a long time, it's just like that. It's meaningless. He understood the shroud diagram too well. A picture was unfolded, and it was filled with ghastly white bones. There were no young ladies wearing stockings, nor were there any young and beautiful female university students. Even if there were, they were nothing more than pink skeletons. After looking at it for a long time, other than being able to clearly count the number of bones on a man and a woman's body, it seemed to have no other value. Dusk felt that as long as Wang Ling got tired of studying it, it wouldn't be long before he could return it to her. Thinking of this, he turned around and placed his hand on the 7-colored astrolabe on his back. Just as he was about to enter the password, he found that Monk Golden Lamp had not left. Sue? Tyrant replied, I've come all the way here to deliver the chaos armor. Are you going to be so stingy that you won't even give me a cup of tea? Dusk was silent. Actually, he didn't hate the tyrant. It was just that he was used to being alone, and had never brought anyone else back to his residence. There were only 2 of them in this area. Peng Shiren and the tyrant. One was the Dao ancestor's personal disciple, and the other could be considered an old acquaintance of his. Go in, don't touch anything, Dusk warned coldly. Then, he twisted his palm and opened the passage to the astrolabe. Tyrant smiled and took a step forward. At the same time, the grave god suddenly opened his eyes in the star-devouring array. It looked like everything had gone smoothly. Everything had been within the grave god's expectations, including the fact that Peng Shiren's soul had been taken away by Dusk. What do you plan to do next, Senior? Chiechiohu asked. Are you going to save Senior Shiren? Save? The grave god smiled. Because he already didn't need Peng Shiren, this was a game of chess. From the moment Peng Shiren had made up his mind to go to Earth to cause trouble for Wang Ling, he had already made up his mind. In the end, this kid had lost because he was too young and too cautious. In order to be safe, he had actually placed his body in the star-devouring array and sent his soul to Earth. It had started as early as that. The grave god had thought of a plan that would satisfy both sides. He had then sent out the ancient divine weapon to pretend to rescue Peng Shiren, while in fact, he had wanted to draw Dusk to Peng Shiren's side. The plan to have Dusk rescue Peng Shiren, the premise of this plan was that he had to know that Dusk still existed in this universe. And this, ever since the grave god and Peng Shiren had decided to work together, he had immediately sensed Dusk's existence. Peng Shiren was the only one who had been kept in the dark. He was far more familiar with Tao ancestor Wang and Dusk than Peng Shiren had imagined. And now, Peng Shiren's soul had been taken back to his residence by Dusk. This was actually part of his plan. As long as Peng Shiren didn't come out, then the next step of his plan could be carried out. My venerable self doesn't need him anymore, the grave god said with a smile. But only Senior Shiren knows the location of the heavenly tomb, that's right. The grave god nodded. He then turned to look at Peng Shiren's body, whose eyes were closed. And his mistake was that he left this body in the star-devouring array. Chiechiohu was stunned. He hadn't expected the grave god to be this kind of grave god. In the end, what he wanted was not the heavenly tomb itself, but Senior Peng Shiren's body. The grave god glanced at Chiechiohu. He didn't care about the strange thoughts in Chiechiohu's mind. His original plan was to feign civility and cooperate with Peng Shiren. After the heavenly tomb devoured the other half of his soul, he would then devour Peng Shiren. As for the current plan, it was plan number 2. The only difference from plan number 1 was that Peng Shiren's soul was still being held by Dusk. He couldn't devour it. But it made no difference to the grave god whether he devoured it or not. His original goal was only to take back the things that were sealed in the heavenly tomb that belonged to him. Shiren, go, take me to the heavenly tomb. At this moment, the grave god opened his evil eye. He placed his hand on Peng Shiren's body and called out softly. This was a simple spell that could awaken muscle memory. Even if Peng Shiren's soul wasn't here, as long as his body went to the heavenly tomb, it would automatically move like a walking corpse. Under the control of this spell, it would automatically move like a walking corpse. All the grave god had to do was follow Peng Shiren's body. Buzz! Peng Shiren's eyes, which had been tightly shut, suddenly emitted a bright red light. Then, he slowly stood up and moved. The starlight under his feet slowly gathered. In the next breath, he disappeared from the devouring star. All of you, stay here and wait for my return. The grave god left these words for Chiechiohu, the silver-skinned human king, and Jiogong Xinghui. Then, he disappeared in an instant and went after Peng Shiren's body. He just had to wait for the other half of his soul that was sealed in the heavenly tomb. Then, everything would come to an end. He no longer had to wait for Peng Shiren's arrangements and act according to anyone's wishes, because at that time, he would have 10 times the power he had when he was at his peak. He would truly be omnipotent and destroy everything. Even if Joy appeared, he wouldn't be a match for him. After traveling through the infinite Milky Way for billions of light years, the universe here gradually became clear. The reason why it was clear was because the grave god discovered that there were very few galaxies in this space. Even the meteorites floating in the air seemed to have decreased a lot. After looking through the deep, chaotic, and profound star map of the universe, even the grave god discovered for the first time that there was such a unique paradise in the infinite Milky Way. This place was too clean. It was as if it was a place that hadn't been polluted. In fact, the grave god could even feel the flow of air in this space. All the things that defied common sense were actually reflected in this space. Is the heavenly tomb located here? The grave god said with a profound gaze. It was no wonder that after so many years of searching for the heavenly tomb in the infinite Milky Way, he still couldn't find it. The infinite Milky Way was too vast, and there were too many mysterious places that even he had never thought of. If he searched with common sense, he definitely wouldn't find anything. In front of him, Peng Shiren's physical body had already slowed down, and it finally stopped at a certain coordinate. The grave god couldn't help but laugh. You paid such a huge price to seal me for so many years. I'm afraid that even you didn't expect that today's seal would be broken by your proudest disciple, right? At this moment, Peng Shiren expressionlessly raised his hand and activated the universal passcode in his hand. A spatial crack that was just big enough for one person to pass through appeared. The grave god thought that the passage was about to open, but right at this moment, the sound of bells suddenly rang out from the crack. An old woman with a hunched back and a lantern in her hand came out of the crevice. The handle of this lantern was a dragon head, and it looked like an ancient object at first glance. Below the lantern hung a series of golden bells. As the old woman staggered forward, they constantly swayed and emitted a crisp sound. The grave god was slightly displeased by the sound. The bells were no ordinary objects. They were clearly also ancient objects. It was a lantern made from a chaotic object, and below it hung a series of bells that also came from a chaotic object. Who is it? The old woman said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it sounded like a heavenly bell in this space. The sound waves spread out and gradually grew stronger. In the end, it was like a tsunami that swept up the surrounding wind. The sound of an explosion came from the distant space. The old woman's greeting directly caused the space to react violently, and the shockwaves spread very far away. The ear-piercing howls of the wind were actually the wails of the spirits of the planets. Interesting. The grave god opened up his spiritual shield and stood there unmoving. This kind of display of strength was unable to do anything to him. This old one has been ordered by the Tao ancestor to guard the heavenly tomb. No one is allowed to approach. The old woman looked at the evil-eyed creature in front of her. The grave god floated in the air, maintaining his cross-legged posture. He looked insufferably arrogant. His dark purple skin was tattooed with blood-red battle tattoos. His seemingly dry and shriveled face had 3 evil eyes that didn't belong to a human growing on it. His pitch-black mane flowed down his temples and was braided into 2 braided braids. She actually knew about the grave god's origins. Those evil eyes were his greatest symbol. With just those eyes alone, she could recognize that this was the terrifying creature that Tao ancestor Wang had paid a huge price to deal with back then. Thus, the old woman didn't dare to slack off in the slightest. The location of the heavenly tomb was a secret. Apart from Peng Shiren, no one else had the ability to find this place. As for the grave god's sudden appearance, the old woman understood everything when she saw Peng Shiren, who was being manipulated like a puppet. Those who force their way into the heavenly tomb will die. The old woman didn't say anything else. As the grave guardian of the heavenly tomb, she had to complete the mission that Tao ancestor Wang had entrusted to her. Even if she had to pay with her life, she had to do everything possible to stop the person in front of her. Even though the old woman knew in her heart that there was a huge difference in strength between her and the grave god, the universe is about to fall into chaos. The old woman said in her heart before she made up her mind to attack. Buzz! The next moment, the old woman lifted the lantern in her hand and opened the revolving lid. She used 2 fingers to take out the white flame inside, and then flicked it towards the grave god. Go! The old woman shouted softly. The small white flame instantly exploded with a destructive brilliance that was as bright as a star. The white flame turned into a unicorn and rushed towards the grave god. The scene created by the small white flame was vast and boundless. In an instant, the entire space was engulfed in a spiritual sea. Almost every inch of the space was in chaos. Seeing this scene, the grave god retracted its spiritual shield and allowed itself to be baptized by the white flame. He allowed himself to be baptized by the white flames. There was only a slight burning sensation, not much pain. The old woman was shocked. She didn't expect that her heavenly ocean's sacred flame would lose its effect. That was a type of ancient flame, a supreme sacred flame cultivated from harvesting the core flames of hundreds of millions of stars. But now, the heavenly ocean's sacred flame had no effect on the grave god at all. The old woman's eyes widened in shock. Although she already knew that there was a difference in strength between her and the monster in front of her, she didn't expect the monster to be this strong. Is that it? Then, it's my turn to attack. At this moment, the grave god in front of her shouted, "Weaklings, retreat." Then, he stretched out a finger and a powerful spiritual light shot out from his fingertip, directly splitting the white flame in front of him into two. When the old woman came back to her senses, the grave god had already split the sea and grabbed her head. Chapter 1550. The moment her head was grabbed by the pitch-black claw, the old woman felt her blood rush to her head and her lips trembled. She did not show it on the surface, but she was actually terrified. Although she had expected the strength of the person in front of her, she did not expect him to be this strong. Sometimes, the difference in strength could be seen in simple details. Not only did the grave god's retreat for the weak divine light instantly cut through her sea of holy flames, it also grabbed her head at a speed invisible to the naked eye. Although I had expected that the old man would send someone to guard the heavenly tomb, I did not expect him to send such a weak servant. I didn't expect that the one they sent to guard the tomb would be such an unbearable servant, said the grave goddess. With his current strength, he would not panic even if he encountered a hoe. But the old woman in front of him was much weaker than the hoe. I know I am no match for you, but there is always someone stronger than you. I advise you to understand that. The old woman sneered, but she was neither servile nor overbearing. Of course I understand that. But you don't know that I have always been the strongest. The grave god sighed and could not help but laugh. When I take back the other half of the soul in the heavenly tomb and kill that young man on earth, there will be no more trouble in the universe. As soon as he finished speaking, the hand that was holding the old woman suddenly rumbled and endless dark chaotic light was released from his palm. It directly poured down from the top of the old woman's head. It contained powerful spiritual energy and the power of rules, showing the grave god's extraordinary power. The old woman's body was enveloped by this black light. She was like a little chick that had been lifted up, completely unable to resist. Her body inflated like a balloon. Then, pang! She turned into a cloud of ashes. Under the powerful energy pouring down, the old woman did not even have the chance to scream. Too weak. You can't even withstand a single blow. The grave god stopped. He had thought that the heavenly tomb's guardian would not be too weak. In the end, he was just an idiot who relied on a few chaotic tools to show off. Among the ancient figures, who did not have a few chaotic tools, the grave god still had a lot of them. He had thought that as the heavenly tomb's tomb guardian, he would at least be able to force him to take out a chaos tool to show his respect. Unexpectedly, this old woman was too weak. He glanced at the place where the old woman had disappeared. His face was expressionless as he turned around and walked toward the place where the old woman had just appeared. Just now, the old woman had stepped out of the spatial rift opened by Pengshiren. The grave god felt that this spatial fissure was a passageway to the heavenly tomb. He had already memorized the exact coordinates. Old man, you didn't expect this, did you? In the end, you buried me and sealed me here. In the end, I had to dig your coffin out with my own hands. At this moment, the grave goddess stretched out her sharp claws. He possessed unparalleled strength, directly piercing into the void, forcefully ripping open the space of that coordinate. For a moment, the space nearby trembled and thunder rumbled. Waves of powerful spiritual energy spread out with the tomb god at the center. Divine light shot into the sky, creating a shocking scene. Such a shocking scene, if there were any spectators, they would definitely exclaim that doomsday had arrived. On the other hand, the grave goddess seemed to have done something very normal. His expression was calm, and no matter how horrifying the scene around him was, there was no change in his expression. After a few seconds of clawing at the spatial fissure, the grave goddess's eyes finally trembled. It's done. The closed spatial fissure in the heavenly tomb was opened again. The grave goddess was pleasantly surprised, as if her long-cherished wish of many years had finally been fulfilled. However, just as she was about to lean out, a pair of old hands reached out from the spatial fissure and grabbed her claws. The grave goddess was surprised. She didn't expect there to be another person in the heavenly tomb. And this person was none other than the old woman with the lamp. She was the old woman with the lamp that she had killed earlier. You're still alive? The grave goddess was in disbelief. She was sure that the old woman was completely dead after being imbued with that kind of power. During the entire process, she had been carefully observing the old woman with the evil eyes to make sure that the old woman she had captured was the real one and not a substitute or an illusion. But now, the old woman with the lamp that had appeared in front of her was exactly the same as the one she had killed earlier. Whether it was her expression, posture, clothes, appearance, or the way she had carried the lamp, everything seemed to have been replicated without the slightest difference. Of course. It's not that easy to enter the Tao ancestors' heavenly tomb. The old woman with the lamp laughed. Although I can't beat you, you can't do anything to me either. Even if I have to risk my life to block the entrance, it's fine. Let's see who can outlast the other. The grave goddess frowned. She was so infuriated by the old woman's words that her entire body was trembling. I don't believe that I can't kill you, boom. Suddenly, an aura as vast as the ocean covered the heavens and covered the earth. It was like a storm that made one's face tremble. The old woman almost lost her balance, but her lantern was as steady as Mount Tai in the wind, not moving at all. Weaklings, retreat. The grave goddess used the same trick again. This time, she opened her fingers, and 5 beams of divine light shot out from her fingertips like 5 sharp swords. They stabbed toward the old woman's head, chest, and other vital parts. Boom! The old woman's body exploded into pieces on the spot. This time, he added a little incantation to his move. It could destroy the person who was hit and prevent them from reincarnation. It could limit 99% of resurrection spells. The grave goddess felt that the old woman must have used some method to resurrect herself, or some dharma treasure to replace her death. However, not long after the old woman exploded. From the crack in space, another old woman who looked exactly the same walked out with a lantern. The grave goddess was surprised. He pondered in his heart, could it be that this old woman had multiple births? There was a popular type of girl these days. The female protagonist would give birth to multiple births. For example, one child with 6 treasures. A domineering president knocks at the door. The scene in front of her made the grave goddess think of that. He looked at the old woman who kept coming back to life and could not help but think of the title of the book, One Child with 10,000 Treasures, an old woman with a lantern. This old woman couldn't have come out of a rock, right? Why? Are you feeling despair already? The old woman smiled. There are many people who want to kill me, but almost none of them can really kill me. You're not human? The grave goddess was also confused. He used his eye of evil to scan the tomb keeper in front of him. All of a sudden, he understood one thing: the real way to kill the old woman might not be through the old woman's body. The real body should be the old woman's lantern. Every time, the old woman would come out with a lantern, the grave goddess stared at the old woman and thought to herself. He thought of a method that was beyond resurrection spells. And it was not within the range of 99% of resurrection spells. It was also a spell that Tao ancestor Wang had been researching but had not officially used. As an old rival of Tao ancestor Wang, the grave goddess naturally knew something about it. After so many years, it was not surprising that this method was developed. Did that old fart impart the undying grasp to you? The grave god asked. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.